One of the best ways that you can support the podcast and your training is to join the crew. When you join the crew, you get an extra crew cast podcast every single month. You also get access to our Discord, which has a training Q&A with Team Elite FTS members. You get form checks. You can upload any of your training footage and have your lifts diagnosed, sometimes within minutes, by multiple people. Access to close to 30 different ebooks, training logs, and first sign up access to our weekend training retreats, train your ass off, and other events that we do. Biggest takeaways from that, though, what people enjoy the most and get the most out of is the training Q&A and the form checks, as well as the extra podcast.
Hey, Matt Goodwin here with elitefts.com equipment sales. Just wanted to put this out here to let you guys know that our team of equipment specialists are here to help you guys. So whether it's a high school, a personal training facility, a garage gym, we've got years and years of experience on building these things out and laying them out and designing them and making sure you're buying the things that you need and not necessarily the things that you will never use. So myself, Nate Harvey, Chris Bartle, we've got years of experience. Chris and Nate have both been strength coaches, business owners. We can help you guys in any aspect of your gym build. So never hesitate to reach out to us. There's a contact us page on the website. All of our information's on there. You can reach me directly at mgoodwin@elitefts.net. The phone number here is 888-854-8806. And we can answer any questions you guys have. The website's a little hard to navigate at times. We have different ways that we can kind of guide you through that process as well. We can help you with layout. We can help you with pricing, quotes, anything else you need. There's other options that are not necessarily on the website as far as customizations, different dumbbells, plate options, cardio equipment. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're always here to help, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to elitefts.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time. Americ Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told as part of getting older? You just go to americhealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americhealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk.
Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, what's up, guys? We're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is, again, AJ Roberts. AJ was on podcast 137. So go check that out, because that will give his history, deep story, all that other, his whole timeline's kind of in there. We're going to jump in his timeline from that point, kind of moving forward. AJ has been in the Fitness Hall of Fame, 3 all-time world records, been in powerlifting since 2005. Best lifts, 1205. Right? See, I screwed it up the first time, and I even watched it to make sure I didn't screw it up, and I wrote 1205. And so you could say that was all intentional. 931 and which was recently an 815 with a 2855 total. Westside Barbell alumni, Team Elite FTS alumni, took a break from powerlifting from 2015 to 2022, which we'll get into that, because I think when you came back, you were just starting this road back, or whatever we want to call it, the comeback, the road back, the delusional just delusional quest that's, we'll figure out what that's going to be. And, but on your way back, you hit 915 in 2022, and then 925 in March this year, 931. No, 925 you had to miss at 970, 935 in October, or 931 in October. But I'll give you the extra, because I took away the 5 pounds.
There you go.
I had it back there.
I'll take it.
And with a shot at 1,003. So let's just jump off with that there. We spoke about you wanting to come back, and you alluded to, Louis' passing kind of being part of all that, which that's good motivation, but motivation's temporary. Mm-hmm. Then once you came back, what pulled you back in? Because there had to be more than just that too.
Yeah. So, basically I'd been trying to, in 2012 when I stepped away, I was like, I'm going to do CrossFit and, go from the strongest to the fittest. And ended up, injuring my pec, not doing CrossFit. Like I was showing off to the powerlifters. They wanted to do 225 reps. So, I jumped in with them after I'd done 2 workouts that day already. And that's how I injured my pec. When I injured my pec, it was like, okay, what can I do? Like, if I can train the whole body, how do I work around this? That's what led to the bodybuilding. Did the bodybuilding show in 2016. But after that, I started looking at my life, and I was engaged, and that broke down right after the bodybuilding. When I broke the first world record, that's when my marriage ended, right after that. So I started looking at it, and it was like, oh, every time I do these massive physical transformations, like that, it's like I neglect my relationships. And so going into a new relationship, basically, I was like, I don't want to screw this up. And I think subconsciously I associated like trying to attain some kind of, high performance to neglect of the relationship. So I basically quit cold turkey. And then I kept trying to come back to working out, not powerlifting, but I kept trying to find the thing. And so, I went to this warrior program that was kind of like, we did SEAL Fit stuff and stuff like that. And then I tried to do the SEAL Fit workout programs. And then I tried to do Spartan races. And so I tried to do all of these things. I could never stick to it. And the last thing I tried was the 75 hard, twice a day workouts and a bunch of other stuff. And I did it for like 64 days. And then I got sick, and I'd gone swimming that day with my kids. And then I worked out in the morning, and then during the day I'd gone swimming. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was like, oh fuck, I gotta go do my second workout. And my wife was like, but you were swimming with the kids today. Why don't you just count that? And I was sick, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, you're right. Like that's like, I was in the pool for 3 hours. Sure. I'll just count that. The next day I was listening to one of Andy's podcasts about guys who were doing 75 hard and golfing, and they were using that as a workout. And he was going on about integrity. And I was like, I got to start over from scratch. So made it 64 days. And then I said, I'm starting from scratch. Like, I'm going to do this right. I made it like 3 days, fell off. Made it like a week, fell off. And I just couldn't find that consistency. And so coming back, like you said, part of it was motivated by Louis, but part of it was like, maybe the competition is what will keep me doing this. And if I was 340 when I started. And I was like, I can come down, and then I'll come down to 308, and then I'll go down to 275, go down to 2. So I can use it as a weight loss thing to hold me, because it's weight classes, to hold me accountable. Well, of course, I get to the 308 weight class, and I just stay there, basically. Actually, I blowed it up for the Arnold because I entered the wrong class. And if I'd gone down a weight class, it'd have messed up. It was the last man standing. Yeah. So I had to start with 650 versus 750. I didn't have a bench. Sure, I could touch 650 in. So I was like, oh, I got to go super heavyweight. So I did what we all do. So I blowed it up to 318. That. But
that's different, though. There's a different intent there.
Yeah. And so then just before my last meet, I was like in the sauna and just like thinking, I was like, why haven't you lost weight? Like, why are you still at 308? And I realized my identity as a powerlifter is the 308 world record holder. And so I'd been stuck there because that's who I was as a powerlifter. And so my mind began to shift. I started looking into it and I just realized, okay, got to let go of that identity. And, unfortunately, it was like right before the meet, I stepped on the scale like a week before and I was a 302. And I was like, oh man, I feel like my body's just losing weight because like, I'm technically I've put it out there.
Yeah.
So I ate pretty much Panda Express for the week of the meet, took a bunch of the element salts to bloat me up, came into the meet at 310. And I said, after this meet, I'll go back down. So I'm under 300 now, going down to 275. But really it's that like for me to show up 4 days a week in the gym, I have to have the meet in the future. And it doesn't need to be that soon. I'm doing 2-3 meets a year, maybe. And right now it's just been bench only, but it's like, why do I go to the gym? Well, I have to, because if I don't go to the gym, how am I going to do the meet? Right.
So you need an anchor.
Yeah. So it's that anchor. And hopefully at some point I won't need the anchor, and that's when I can just train and do that. But it's, for me, I've not been able, like, I love training now, which before I wasn't that much in love with training. I just did it because it was necessary, right? It was the discipline. Now it's not really discipline. Like I just love being in the gym, love training. But without the meet, I will miss, because I think it's my priorities have changed in life, like with, building wealth and then raising a family. Like if it's choosing between my family and the gym, I will choose my family now. Whereas before, I know I wouldn't have made that decision. And so I think it's just where it lies in my priorities in life. And so that competition anchors the need to train. And that's what just keeps fueling me. And it keeps me sane. And I've been working a lot of stuff out in the gym over the last few years,
Well, there's something with, and I'm probably the wrong person to talk about this, but there's something with having that anchor out there, where the beginning of each year I'll set an audacious goal. It's achievable, but I don't put an end date on it, but it has to happen before the end of the year. That way I don't have to deal with, 5 weeks out, you're banged up and you got to force it. I can just move it, so, but it's big enough that I have to train all year to be able to get that. I have to go through different phases, build the muscle, build the strength, all this every single year. And I have to have that, because if I don't know if I would train at all. And I'm fucking 56 now, that, and I don't even see it as a bad thing. I used to see it as a bad thing. Like, why do I need to have that just to be able to exercise? Yeah. And at this point, I've lived more years than I have left. I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm not changing it. So each year, whatever that anchor is, what can satisfy that desire to lift something heavy, but not kill me in the process that much, and not, you know what I'm saying? So it's a high fucking box spider bar. So I'm trying to reduce as many potential hazards that could arise, from that, but yet is big enough that, now I'm in that final push and I'm like, fuck, because I'm not where I should be. Now, this is a weird time. This one's weird for me fucking now, though, because I've not been in this spot. Because I know one answer is I could just increase my shit and it would be taking care of the problem. But I already decided I can't do that. So now I got that fucking Animal House thing going on. Fucker, the elbow and the danger. I was like, just take the shit and fucking, and I'm in this weird fucking place because I need a good super compensation deload to be able to do what I want to do. And I've not been in this spot before. Normally it's a little bit easier, but when I learned how to lean into that, then it helped a lot, because again, if you take that away, man, I don't know. Yeah.
And I think both of us have gone on that. We've taken it away.
Yeah.
We've taken it away, and it doesn't lead to better things. Like at some point we've looked at ourselves and said, okay, why am I so obsessive? Why do I need this? Like, okay, like this is a problem I need to fix, right? Like I need to take care of this, or like change my behavior. Like, because I'm an angry lifter and I use anger to lift, right? But back when I was doing that, that was how it kept me sane, because it was an outlet. I took that outlet away and it's like, where does that anger go? Right. And it just stayed inside of me and it's just bubbling up, and it creates a lot of frustration, a lot of like, annoyance with the world. And it's like, I don't get normal. I don't get average. Like, I don't get how people don't think like me. And I thought that was my problem. I thought I got to fix that, versus like now it's like, I just have to accept that. And I think like for some reason, we're always convinced we have to change versus just leaning into who we are, but then figuring out how do you lean in a healthy way, right? And that's the boundaries that you set in place. Like same thing for me. It's like, I know I could take more shit and my body wouldn't hurt as much, but it's like, I'm not going to do that because I know in terms of life expectancy, there's a safe range. And then there's the fringe that we don't know about because nobody's researched it. Nobody's gone and got the top fucking strength athletes and said, all right, let's do a 10-year study on you. First of all, you're going to lose 90% of the people you start with. So you're going to have a very small, but like if someone's done this for this long, what are their blood levels? Is it healthy? And, you see in all sports, there's a point. Bodybuilding's a clear one because you can see the difference, right? But there's a point where they have to step back. And when they do, they still look phenomenal, but they lose like 30, 40 pounds of muscle, and it's literally because they have to take away the amount of drugs they're doing and they go to a healthy level and you see that physical transformation. It's a visual, right? With strength, it's the same thing. You come back and I know I could take Trent again and I could probably bench that 1,000 really fast, because I'll get, it's a thing. I could throw in a ton of anadrol and Debo and all of a sudden, like, I'm going to gain maybe 20 pounds of muscle quicker than I would. But it's like, what's the risk to that? And so like when I came back, it was like, I'm going to bench 1,000 before I'm 40. That was the goal. So I've got, I'm 38, 39 in March. So I've still got a little bit of time, but it's like every meet, it's like that little bit of frustration when, my numbers have gone up, I take a second attempt PR just because I feel like I'm stronger than my PR. And then the third attempt, I go for what I think I can get. Right. Yeah. And that stretch from the 970 to the 1,003, I was pretty confident. And then when you miss it, you're like, oh dang, back to the drawing board. But that little devil's on the shoulder, like just fucking load up and go like one time, just do it one time. But I know it wouldn't be one time. And that's the boundary you have to set. It's like, if you cross that boundary, you're back in hell, right? You're back and following that path. And so it's checks and balances and it's not easy, right? But that's what's come with maturity is that ability to step back and say, oh, you're starting to do it a little bit again. You're starting to go to a place that like, you didn't like that person. Like, yes, you were a world record holder, but you didn't like that person. Like, and I think that's, when you look in the mirror, you got to like yourself and so you make those decisions based on that, but it's tough because the feedback from the barbell never lies.
Well, exactly. and as you continue forward, because now it will be at a lighter weight where for each year that I've done the stupid shit that I've done, it's a little lighter, so this year will be at 240 instead of last year being 265 or whatever it was. And, but as I got lighter, now sleep becomes more important, all these other factors that I really didn't give that much shit about nutrition, sleep. I mean, I get fucking protein and, but now all those matter more, right? So it's actually made everything else healthier. But if I go and was to, take Trent or whatever that's going to be. Now, when I go to compare to what I did last year, it's not the same because those factors changed there compared to there. So then I don't know, is it actually the same as what I did at a higher weight class, at a higher weight or
Yeah, and I think that's the mental torture, right? Because you have a former version of yourself. So you're kind of always like you're trying to become the best version of yourself while you're simultaneously chasing an old version of yourself that you've let go of because it's a number, right? So it's like, I want to come back and do full power again. But I did some nerve damage in my neck doing some round back good mornings, just too much weight, too many reps and didn't shut it down when I knew I should and have some nerve damage there. So it's putting a barbell on my back right now causes pain. So, I'm doing belt squats and working around it. But then, I also have like these herniations in my low back that keep popping out and I'm not giving myself enough time to recover. And then like the deadlift has been, I don't know what happened there. It's like it's embarrassing. Like I can raw bench more than I can deadlift right now. Yeah. It feels like, but it's like time. Like I look at the time and it's like, if I look from now until, I was going to do the full power at the Arnold and I'm probably going to have to end up doing bench only. But if I look at that and get frustrated over it, that's what you do as a beginner powerlifter. When you're an older powerlifter, you realize like it might be 2 years before I can go put up a decent total again. And so you just have to have the patience to work around it. But the frustration is like I'm comparing myself back to who I was, and it's like the band shirts allowed me to bench more than what I benched in the poly. But it's like, I know in the squat suit, I used to get 400 pounds out of
that's going to be a
canvas
tough one.
Press.
Yeah.
But like, I put 700 pounds on my back with Brees on and I'm like, man, why does this feel so heavy? Because my body's not used to it. I haven't built up that. And now something like, I'm sure we'll get into it, but in terms of training, like something I've had to learn is that like my training, I can't do the traditional four day a week template the way I did it at Westside. And I'm trying to figure out, I've talked to Chad Aches about this a bunch, but I'm trying to figure out, is it my conditioning or is it my body? Because when I think back to when I was at Westside, that was on the back of 7, 8 years of training before I got there.
Mm-hmm.
I took 6 years off and I've come back and my mind is immediately wanting to do the numbers I did before.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, maybe it's going to take me another 5, 6 years to get back to that. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also part of the adventure, right? It's part of the puzzle now. And like you said, sleep, diet, all of these things. And I don't know if it's needed when you're young, because I think there's something to like ignorance, and when you look at like if you take work, for example, like in your 20s, like you can hustle, you can grind, you can burn yourself into the ground. You can't do that in your 40s. Your health would suffer, right? But in your 20s, you can bounce back for it. It's kind of like you go out on a bender with your buddies and get wasted. Then when you're 20, the next day you wake up and you go do whatever. When you're 40, you're in bed for 2 days. So you go, I'm fucking drinking like that. And so you can do things differently. And so I think there's like figuring out what you need at what time is very important. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is we have so many inputs now. And it's like, if you listen to a lifter in their 50s, the advice you get is going to be completely different to someone in their 20s. But like, if you're in your 20s, like, if you're intelligent, you'll pick out what you need from that. But if you follow it blindly, you're going to end up probably undertraining or doing things that aren't necessary, like warming up for an hour in the gym before you train. Yeah. Like when you're in your 20s, you don't need to, because your body doesn't need that. It's already, might need to do a couple of things, but you can warm up under the bar, like Louis used to say, But then when you get older, and I saw this with Louis too, like when I first got there, foam rolling, soft tissue work, Louis just would make fun of me all the time. Before I left, Louis was getting body work and, foam, like doing that stuff. And so it's just because whatever's going to keep you lifting, you're going to do,
Well, I think that, there's different chapters or different phases. And in your 20s, if it's business or training or really anything, you want to accumulate as much experience and knowledge as you possibly can. So, in business, you're reading everything you can, you're speaking everything, you're taking bigger risks, because what the fuck, you got nothing to lose, so you accumulate all that. And hopefully during that decade, you take away enough things that actually work and make a difference. So then when you get into your 30s to your 40s, you don't have to make all the stupid decisions. And some of those stupid decisions may have been right. Yep. And so then as you get older and training as well, as you're picking your movements now, you know that these are gold for me. Not so much. I can revisit them if I want. But in your 20s, you don't know. So and you have the benefit of youth to be able to recover from just about fucking anything. Yeah. So I would make the argument that if you're in your 20s, you need to actually just kill it, in all aspects, just to figure out all those things. Because as you get older, your body changes. You don't recover as well. You can't stay up, all night, 20 hours on a stretch working. Yep. And some do, but over the period of the week, you're still going to be the same net, because you're going to be burned out. So they're going to have those other days, but you're also not going to waste time doing things and activities that aren't productive. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, I have a 5 and 3-year-old, and my 5-year-old has so much energy. Like, she's just bouncing off the walls. And, she said to me, Dad, why am I so crazy? And I'm like, you just have more energy. I was like, you have so much energy, and you just want to go. And so we got to go out and climb and do stuff, we got to be physical. And she's like, how come you don't have so much energy? And I said, well, Daddy's older and I don't get enough sleep, and I'm a little bigger than I should be. And we have these conversations, but what you realize is like, when I look at her, like, she doesn't think about slowing down for a rest. She's just go, and then sleep. Yeah. And you can do that as an adult. You can train yourself to do that. But there is a point that you realize that, like, doing that leads to other problems. But to your point, when you can do it, do it. Mm-hmm. And then when you can't, learn and adjust, right? And that's the key. And there is things you can do, not saying like, oh, you should just go blindly in your 20s, right? There is things you can do. Yeah. But like you said, you can take more risks because you have more time. And so when you have that, it's like, you leverage it, like leverage your advantages. Mm-hmm. And like, if you can get away with certain, like, I'll use Jimmy Kolb as an example, right? Jimmy does not like speed work, and that's fine. But Louis always said the strongest guy is the guy who can lift the heaviest the most often, right? Jimmy has the advantage where he can go heavy twice a week and he's like, over 1,000 pounds on the bench twice a week and he recovers, right? So for him, there is no reason to do speed work because he's one of those guys that, would fit the Bulgarian system as it is. Someone else who can't, like who's a slow athlete, who doesn't have explosive power, speed work's going to be essential. And I laugh because people think Louis invented dynamic effort. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like the idea of speed work, however you want to phrase it. Bill Kazmar talks about it.
Yeah.
How every rep was as explosive as he can. You go overseas and they're still doing jumping squats. And the barbell's coming off their back. And I'm cringing thinking, man, that coming down on their spine like that, they could, cause damage. Just put a band on. Like same thing, less risk. But the concept is not new. The idea is not new, but it's figuring out like what you need when you need it and self-regulating. And I think that's what's so confusing to me when I look at training and these philosophies and things like that is I think people, when they use the word conjugate, which is, concurrent training, which is basically you max out, you do dynamic work and you do repetition work. That's essentially the method, right? And but they see the template that Louis and you guys back in the deep squatter days put out there, and they go, if it's not that, it's not conjugate. And it's like, wait a minute, it's not true. Like the idea is having these three things in. Now, Louis put it in the system he felt best. But if we go through the training crews that happened over the years, we see the change in the program as well.
Yeah.
And the change was because what we figured out was what carried over better to our maximal lifts in full gear, right? You start taking that away and people say, well, how do you train conjugate for raw? Well, my training partner is a raw lifter, trains exactly like me. There is no difference. The difference is in when he's box squatting, I'm not trying to get him to sit all the way back because you don't raw squat like that. I'm trying to have him do the same technique. When we're bench pressing, I'm not having him touch his belly. I'm making sure he has the right technique. And so how does it carry over? When he started, I think it was about 8 months ago with me, his best bench was 285 and he's done 315 like it was nothing. Like he did it the other day. That was all he wanted to do was 3 plates. We stopped there and, he's going to go for a bigger bench in a week here. But what's super interesting about it is I'm like, I don't see how it doesn't work for raw lifters as they used to only train raw.
Yeah.
Like the gear came in and, we started using briefs for squatting because our gear maxes became so much bigger than our raw maxes that we needed the briefs to handle the 50% and still be fast, right? You take that away. Okay. Take away the percentages. We're moving fast with accommodating resistance so that we're learning to go all the way through the lift. The concept is move fast. If you got a percentage on there that's slow, it's not speed work.
Yes.
It's repetition work, right? It's going to have a different thing. And then I don't know how people miss the fact that the magic is not in the main movements. They're there for technical practice, right? And, max effort. Why are we using these different bars? Well, you got 33 vertebrae, right? That's 33 links in a chain. If you squat with the same, with a barbell in the same place every single time, you're only going to strengthen a certain way. You start moving where that pressure point is, or the forces, and essentially you're strengthening the whole chain. The other beautiful thing, we've talked about this before, is your max on a straight bar versus a safety squat bar versus a cambered bar is vastly different. So if you max out one Monday with a straight bar, let's say 1,000 for argument's sake, and then the next week you max out with a giant camber bar and you do 850, you've now regulated your training so that you've maxed out, but you haven't maxed out. And so you're essentially creating all of that. And that's what the concurrent system is. We're just building all energy systems simultaneously, right? And oddly, CrossFit shares the same philosophy. I think that's why Lou, connected there and we ended up doing all the stuff we did there. When you look at some of these other training programs that people are running now, block periodization, that has phases, right? And, Shelco, I believe, has phases. I've never followed it, right? But most of these guys are following training programs that are just repetition-based training programs off of Prillipin's chart, which works, but there's no phases.
Oh, but for conjugate?
No, for just in their general training. So their training program, they can't explain it, right? For one, it's basically Prillipin's chart percentages. And so you're like, oh, well, it works because they're in that repetition method range. Optimal training. But where is your GPP phase? Where is your hypertrophy phase? Like we have it all in one program. So we don't need to do a phase here and a phase there. Oddly, we do phases. People don't recognize it.
There's just more emphasis.
Circa max is our peaking cycle, right? Like people say, well, where's the peaking in conjugate? Well, it's not, we don't peak, we do circa max, right? You have your speed strength, your strength speed, you have GPP for like after a meet for like a month, it's more GPP.
There's just different emphasis.
Yeah. And so you look at it and it's like, if you want to know if you have a good program, like, look at how linear periodization is, look at how block periodization is, look at how conjugate is. What are you missing from that? That's why you're not improving. If you're not doing assistant exercises to build the main lifts, if you're not, doing phases to build your energy systems, like you don't have a complete program. And it just baffles me because I think people, like right now it's like, oh, conjugate doesn't work for raw lifters and, none of the top raw lifters do conjugate. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't mean it doesn't work for raw lifters. And also you have to understand the reason raw lifters don't do conjugate is because there's nobody who's pushing that. But then I go look at how people are programming and I'm like, there is so many elements of conjugate in their programs. They just don't know it, right? Because they see it, I believe they see that Westside template and they think that's what conjugate is.
Yeah.
And they miss the benefits of the whole system.
What I've seen over time and decades is there used to be just linear, used to be the basic model that everybody would follow, but then there were variations with that. Some people didn't do 8s, they just stayed at 5s and 3s, but there were different variations of that. Then after the meet, there would be off season where some just went straight into linear with lower percentages and others just did bodybuilding work. But, that was very popular, and then conjugate became popular. So then you had basically two different schools of thought. This is probably true going up into while you were still competing at your top at 250 in 2015. Those are kind of like predominant. Mm-hmm. And then coming up through the middle was the more high frequency based programs that we see more prominent today. Right. And with those high frequency based programs, they really can't do all the accessories and supplemental work because the frequency of the main lifts is so high that the energy demands can't accommodate doing more stuff. So then that comes up through the middle. And then that really came up through like IPF, USAPL. Mm-hmm. So it really came up through that market. And, then that becomes that popular to where that's what the majority of the people see now, as they used to see just linear, right? So that's what they see. Then when they see the other things, and they see all the accessories where I don't need the accessories, but if they weren't doing the squat 3 times a week, heavy, medium, light, or however they're waving that block that they're in, then they would have the room for those accessories. So then the conversation really isn't about that. It's about what's more efficient for said lifter to build up weak points, the actual lift or the supplemental movements. And that can be debated on both sides. Fuck, I could debate both ends of that. You could as well. I mean, we could sit there and, just play games where you be that guy, I'll be this guy, then, kind of go through that and debate both sides of all that, where my bias, your bias, and all the people that I pretty much know. And I think everybody ends up kind of in that bias over a period of time, realize they can't just keep hitting the same main movements. That at some point, that regular bench needs to be a close grip. So the variations are more mechanically similar, even in the high frequency models, where it's not bench, bench, bench. It might be bench, close grip bench press, light bench press. And then on the light bench press, they won't call it speed work, but they'll say the intent, is to move it a little bit faster. Yeah. I mean, some will, so.
Yeah. And I've seen programs like that. Yeah. Right. Where I look at it and I'm like, wait a minute, you do rep work and then you max out. And then, oh, wait a minute, you do a main movement and then you have speed work after, but it's not called speed work, but it says, 8 sets of 2 or 8 sets of 3 or whatever they have. It has to be speed rep work because
just a percentage. It says 55, 60%.
Yeah. And so you look at, you go, oh, okay. And you see, but like you said, you're piecing this together. And I think the idea of what's popular is very important because, and we'll use the state of powerlifting as a good starting point for this. When you look at multiply powerlifting, and I know you're going to have Dave on here again, but Dave has been at the top since I left, right? When I left, he was on the top and he's still on the top, right? But there's nobody close to him, right? So if we go to the next rung, right? The reason nobody's close to him is there's not many lifters from 10 years ago that are still active competing, at that level that never took a break or never got injured, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of us are done. Myself, Brian Carroll, like we can go through the list of people you've had on here. We were all active 10 years ago at the top. We have all transitioned to in some way, shape or form. Dave is still, doing what he did. And that's why he's the best in the world. But if we take him out of the picture and we look at the other numbers, those lifters didn't have the people we had to look up to. Right? The lifters that came up over the last 10 years had Stan Efferton was the first real guy back to Raw. And then there was the Lily Bridges and Brandon Lilly and like all these guys. And that was just as social media was beginning to really, Instagram was born, right? And so what you have is you have all of a sudden all of this interest from and I don't care what people think about CrossFit. CrossFit is why powerlifting grew. Like I witnessed it, right? Because you have all of these hardcore gyms all of a sudden, people doing CrossFit getting hurt, but finding that they really like to lift heavy. And so they started testing, like they would do a powerlifting meet or 2 powerlifting meets or whatever. We still have that. But now CrossFit bred the hardcore gym relaunch, right? So now you can have a warehouse gym and people don't think of it as, oh, it's something for meatheads, right? And so you have all of these places and you have the same type of people who they don't want to do a boot camp. They want to get stronger. So that's fueled the sport. But who do they have to look up to? They have what's out there on social media. You don't see a lot of geared lifters posting tons of footage. You see raw lifters posting all of their training all the time. Not only that, look at the deadlift numbers. Where are the deadlifters, right? Multiply doesn't have many 900-pound lifters, especially active 900-pound lifters within the last 12 months. You go into raw lifting, and you've got guys, closing in on 1,100. So again, if you're coming up as a lifter, your idols are going to be that. So in terms of training, you're just going to look at what they do. The mistake is that it's the same mistake as if you looked at all the top guys in powerlifting back in the day. The mistake is you're looking at how an individual who probably could do anything they wanted and would improve, from genetics and from whatever. And you're trying to say, like, is this training program good for me? What you need to do is look at how many other lifters have they created. And that's what Louis always talked about. Like, if you want to know who a good coach is, don't look at what the coach has achieved, look at what the team achieves behind them. And I think that we're starting to see that a little bit, where people are starting to realize that, like, just because someone is a phenomenal lifter, it doesn't mean their online program is good. Number one, they might not even be running their online program. Number two, what they're doing, like, does it work for the masses? And that's the thing that I think that, like, I realized, and a lot of it was stuff you said, but realized Westside was a laboratory. What Louis was doing was experimenting, and the meets were the results that he then got to go present back to the world. So it was all time capsuled. But yeah, if you go back to the beginning and read those early articles, it's very different than the late articles.
Oh yeah. And
so if you want to know, like, how do you train raw? Well, it's like, okay, just go back to like the articles that were written probably in the early 2000s. That's probably your best jumping off point, right? Because that's what everybody was doing. And Lou used to rag on us all the time about not using the cambered bench bar, to build the chest. But it was like, well, why? The shirt gives you so much off the chest. I don't need to focus too much on that. I still need to be strong because I need, to get the acceleration, but I really got to put more time into top end strength, and so you take that away. Well, yes, you got to put more time on low end strength, and it's not going to be in the articles that Louis wrote within the last 10 years, because everything he wrote about was for multiply powerlifting. And so I really think that that's what people need to look at when they assess these programs is, if you're just doing the main 3 lifts all the time, well, of course you're going to get injured at some point, because all you're doing is like the same movement over and over and over and over again. And so while that's getting stronger, everything around it's getting weaker because you're not training it. And of course, you're squatting and you start to go forward and you've never done a good morning. Well, you don't have the strength that your squat has as you get out of position. But if you've trained that, you're more likely to be able to pull it back in, or because you have that odd strength. Yeah. And it's like, you look at strongmen, and my wife's competing next weekend in OSG finals in West Virginia, and we've switched her to more conjugate based programming. But you look at strongman and you look at the way they're loading stones and stuff like that, you can't say rounding your back is dangerous. Yes, the risk goes up. You look at how they overhead press, and they're leaning all the way back, and it's basically a low incline bench press that they end up doing. The top ones. So when you start looking at stuff, you realize that the body is supposed to bend and move in all these different directions, and only through lack of mobility and our body is very adaptable. And, if you're a wide stance squatter for 20 years, you probably don't have good internal rotation, right? So what your body does is optimize itself to be the best in that position. But when you try to go to a different position, the injury risk goes up because your body resists it, right? But if you look at these yoga people, we know the body can bend and move like that. So it's not a case that you shouldn't do that. It's just a case that where you are currently, you can't do that, right? And so if you can, and Mike Robinson shared this, and he said basically on a spectrum, if normal is here and really fucked up is over here, as a powerlifter, your goal is not to get to normal, but not to get to fucked up. You've got to find that point that you're optimal. And yes, you're probably not going to be able to do an Olympic lift, or you're not going to be able to do strongman if you're super optimal for powerlifting, right? But it also, it doesn't mean that those movements and those positionings aren't capable. Your body's not capable of doing it. It's just in your current state, you're not. I currently can't run. If I run, I'm getting shin splints. It happens every single time. The body is supposed to be able to run. You're supposed to be able to move, and so you have to look at these things. I think that's how you assess your training of what's missing. If you're doing a program, do you get better? And if you're constantly making progress, there's no reason to change your program until it doesn't make progress, right? And then you might add something in. The beautiful thing I've found with conjugate, and the reason my bias lays towards it, is you never change the program. You just change what's inside the program, right? And so if we were going to train someone who's never done it before, we could argue they could just jump in with a regular program, but we also could take them and say, okay, well, we're going to do for maxes, we're just going to do fives. We're going to do a max of 5, and we're going to shut it down as soon as technique breaks down. And they will make progress like that. And then we can move them to 3s, or we could do 5 1 week on the same barbell, 5 1 week, 3 the next, 1 the next. It's still conjugate, not in the sense that we've learned it to be from Louis, but in the conjugate principles. We've done a 5 rep max 1 week, we do a 3 rep max 1 week, and we do a 1 rep max the week after. And if we stop where the form breaks down, we know, okay, if we did 400 for 5, we know the next week we're going to get more than 400 for 3, and then the week after we're going to get more than that. And you don't need 6 bars for that. You can just use a regular bar. And so when you look at it like that, it's all in the limitation of the mind of the programmer in terms of what you can do, because there was conjugate before there was bands and chains. I don't think people realize this. Oh yeah, right. Where did the overhead press go? Well, we found it didn't carry over to shirted bench press, so we got them eliminated. It's because of wasted exercise for the purpose of our training. My wife, max effort bench is not max effort bench. It's max effort overhead press, because that correlates to her sport. And it's fun coming up with the variations that she can do, because strongman has such a, eclectic selection for competition. We can have some fun with that. But I add a band in there for her, or we use the bamboo bar, and it changes the game, and her body is adapting and changing and making progress quicker than it has before, because we've added new stimulus, right? And we've changed what it is. And so I just think that people need to have more creativity with the way they look at stuff. And, even if you're following a very simple, basic program, how long can you follow that for? And then you have to start to make these changes. And I think you need to pull from the things that have been proven over time, even if you don't take the whole thing.
The way that I've tried to explain this is, and it becomes a little complicated, but you can have a stereo that just has a volume. I'm old, right? So it's not, there should be a dial, yeah, right? A volume dial, right? Just to turn it up. Maybe you got treble, maybe you got bass, you got three. That's all you really have. And at the simplified form, that works. You can have louder music. It can be distorted as all fuck, and you can kind of find something that sounds decent at a certain level, where with programming, it's more like an old equalizer where you have, 15 different dials. One of them is mobility, one of them is flexibility, one of them is absolute strength, one of them's dynamic strength, one of them is, cardiovascular fitness, one of it. And so now you can't have it all at baseline. because then you're not going to exceed at anything. A gymnast is going to need flexibility, way to the top. A power lifter probably a little bit down lower, but somewhere in there is going to be the perfect musical harmony of what you need for whatever that output's going to be. And the more dials that are on there, the more you can auto-regulate, more that you can have control, and the more you can kind of turn some things down when they need. This is conjugate, as you were saying earlier. You turn some things down during certain times to pull the other things back up, to have that perfect balance kind of going into a meet. Post meet, you don't need absolute strength, but you don't need it to fall. So if that's a 10, you just move it down to like a 7, a 7 or an 8. You can't push it all the way down to 0, because it's going to take too long to bring that back up again. But then that cardiovascular conditioning can go from, it should never be a 0. You asked earlier, you don't know if the recovery is more cardiovascular based or just older and not being able to handle the workload. It could simply be cardiovascular based, because it's not enough to be able to move blood and nutrients to be able to recover. Maybe it is a 2 and needs to be a 4. Well, you have the ability to just bump that up a couple, to be able to see without having to move these other things down, but something else might have to move down, to be able to accommodate, for that. And then play it out that way. Going back to what you were saying about the influences that people see coming in, a lot of times when they're looking at those lifts that those lifters are doing, they're only showing the top lifts in the top set. And a lot of times they don't even show the walkout either. So if they have to walk it out, that's part of it. They need to do a deeper dive and to see what actually did they do in that day.
Yeah.
Because if it is a top lifter, I can pretty much guarantee with 80% certainty, because there's going to be some that just do the main lift. There's other things that are in there, but they don't film those because they don't get the engagement. They don't get the views that nobody's going to give a shit about them doing reverse hypers if they're doing those.
Well, and time too, right? So like you say, that they're posting a 10-second clip. I guarantee all of them in the gym for more than an hour. But most people who are getting programming, like their life doesn't evolve around lifting. Right. It's something they do, but it's not who they are. And I think that's a big thing to note too, because that person was probably in the gym for 3 to 4 hours. And if you only have an hour, you have to be able to train within that hour to get the most out of it. And so if it takes you an hour to do the main movement, but you've been programmed those accessories, but you think to yourself, wow, it's, I never see them do it. So you're creating a delusion in the sense of the how fast you can improve, because I was talking about Alex Hormozi yesterday, and, someone was saying well, I can't believe how fast he's done stuff. I'm like, well, I can. So if you work 8 hours and he works 16 hours, he does 2 days and takes you to do 1 day. It's not hard. It's just simple math. So if we break it down to training, if you're in the gym for on average an hour and a half, and top lifters in the gym on average for 3 hours, they're training each day twice as much as you are. So of course, at the end of the year, they're going to make a lot more progress.
Well, let's also not forget with him, he's got 2 decades of fucking things up. So in the 16 hours that he's doing, that's pretty much 80% all effective work.
Exactly. And those are the things that I think that in your 20s, you do need to hear. Right. You could be, because that is how you go. There's this idea of you got to put 10,000 hours in to master something. That's true if you have nobody else helping you. But if you take people who have 100,000 hours and you just use that as your jumping off point, right? You've just eliminated a lot of trial and error, right? And I always joke when people would say oh, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to try this. And I'm like, oh, you can do repetitions on your maxes, but we know that your injury risk goes up. So it's not that you can't do it. It's just that you, on the risk reward as a powerlifter who only does 1 repetition in a competition, you want to lower your injury risk. Well, take a different sport like strongman, where they have rep maxes. We need to train for that. So we have to move our training based on the sport, but we also are understanding that we're increasing the risk of injury. And so if you understand this stuff, and you can learn from someone, and I think that's, the benefit the younger generation has is they have access to more information. I also think it's dangerous, because then they go listen to everybody and they can't make sense of what is true, what isn't true, right? And so they then end up more confused than they started. But it's kind of like, if you can find somebody and stick with somebody, I think that's the key, right? And we can look at coaches that are out there who's been doing it for a while, right? And who has lifters that have been with them for a while, right? And those are the guys that probably are better for you to start with, because where they are now and what they have for you as a beginner, like they've done the experiments. They figured it out. They fucked it all up. Now they're coming, and what you're getting presented is a much better program than they wrote 5, 6, 7 years ago for someone, because they've learned what works, what doesn't work, how to motivate you in the gym. And then a lot of people, that's kind of their thing. Is like, well, if I don't have training partners and I am training on mine, how do we create the intensity that you guys had at Westside? Well, you have to create it on the lifts. And this is where I pulled from John Meadows with Mountain Dog, and so the exposure to bodybuilding, to someone who was in bodybuilding, who had trained at Westside and understood the fundamentals of conjugate system, and then seeing how he applied it, all of a sudden gave me a whole different perspective on how to do accessory exercises. If I'm on my own and I don't have a training partner to push me, I can do a strip set. I can implement rest pause. I can do these things that create intensity without me even needing to be intense, And I think that that's kind of something that is missing with a lot of these people, is they go in the gym, they put their headphones on, and they're just kind of in cruise mode, and the research, and that's something that's fascinating. We have all this new research that comes out, but even from having a spotter there has proven you will lift more when you have a spotter than when you don't. So what are you shortchanging yourself by training alone? Right? There is benefits to it. You train when you want, whenever you want. You don't have to worry about training partners, but you also are making a conscious decision to not be able to do your best day in and day out, right? And the research is there to support it. And I think that these are the things that, are more important than necessarily like whether you're training 4 days a week, like what exercise you're doing. It's these things on how do you push yourself when there's nobody there to push you? And that is something that most people never ask themselves. Like, am I giving it my all today? Did I put 100% into what I'm doing? Most days you're probably not, but if you're not, like at the end of the day, I was looking, did I do my best today? And 9 times out of 10, it's no, but then it's why. And then I have the awareness around that for the next day to improve upon that, right? And I think that people don't do that with training. Like training is just something they go do for an hour and they go home. And I think that is the difference between the top lifters and the lower lifters, is the level of thought that goes into everything around the training.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back to the accessories, but I want to go back to Alex Hormozi, because I think there's a big learning lesson here, because most people who are listening to this know who he is, because he's, all over the fucking internet right now. And what they're they need to look more long-term. And let's just say, and this isn't true, but let's just say that his 100 million leads or whatever, $100 million leads was the end goal, to sell that book. Let's just say, but that's not, but let's just say that's the end goal. If you look at that marketing actually started with the 100 million sales that was free, a free book, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
So you could say, and that wasn't even the launch point, because there was a launch point just to get up to that. But if that book is 4 years away from the second book, from that first book, if you look at everything that he's done outside of acquisitions.com, which is probably more the main goal, but just keep that out of here for a minute and just say the goal was to sell this book, right? And there's 4 years, of marketing and sales and leads and strategy and funneling and all this that's going down into this one day, 4 years later. All they're seeing is that maybe at best the launch of that book, the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is, and looking at all the emails and everything that kind of went into all that. And like, dude, you don't understand where this started. It started way back here, which was built on everything he did before that, where we live in the world of the 12-week training program, where they just want to know, well, what did he do to launch that book? Mm-hmm. Like, if they ask me, it's like, where exactly do you really want to start here?
Well, and that's important, because if we do take that in that picture of that, and we say it was 4 years to launch that book. So you have to ask yourself, if you want to mimic his results, so you're going to make no money for 4 years?
Yes, and give away a great product
to build the
free.
audience and give everything you know away, so that when it's time to launch a book, you have the audience that feels that it's this, one of the laws of influence. If you give somebody something, they feel like they got to give you something back. So if you have not tried to get anything from anybody for 4 years and you just give and give and give, and then you come out with something that's $20, a lot of people, and here's the thing, you didn't have to buy that book to get that book. He gave away the audio book on his podcast. He dropped it over like 10 or something episodes, but the entire audiobook is there for free on his podcast. So there was no reason to give him money, none whatsoever, other than you wanted the physical copy of the book. Majority of people, they didn't care about the book. What they wanted to do was give something to Alex because they felt like he's given so much to them. Mm-hmm. That was a 4-year journey he created. He was only able to do that because he was in a financial position where he didn't need to make money for 4 years. So like you said, you have to go back and, well, how did he get to that position? And you listen to his story and you realize that like it is, the ups and downs and the struggles, but it started with, a lot less customers, a lot higher price points, a lot more like frustration. And he only got to the point he did because he went through that. And I believe that that's kind of like you have live, learn, pass on, right? You have do, have, share, right? But it's everybody sees the first part and the last part and they want to ignore the middle. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the same with training. Like everybody wants to ignore the middle part, which is the hard work. And the only hard work isn't necessarily breaking your back work, right? Like hard work might just be the amount of time and effort you have to put into something. Hard work might be having to spend 2 or 3 hours a day thinking through problems, like just sitting and thinking. And people will be like, well, that's not hard work. Yes, but it's work that nobody else is doing, right? Hard work comes in is the time investment into that thing, the focus on that thing. And the secret everybody doesn't want to admit is that's the only separator. The only separator is the amount of time, effort, and work you're willing to put in to follow the thing you want to achieve. And, in powerlifting or any strength sport, it's getting stronger, right? And are you, go back to what I said earlier, like how long are you willing to do that? And I've, now I'm judging meets and helping out. Like I'm sitting there and I realize like, okay, I'm 38 and, God willing, I'll live to at least 80, I'll make the average male and hopefully longer. Hopefully I'm smart enough and we'll do the things that are needed to prevent life. But let's say I'm going to do this until I'm 65 or 68, right? So I'm going to do this for another 30 years. Well, how many of the lifters that are at the meets are going to be there in 30 years? Maybe 1%? Mm-hmm. Maybe 1%. Yeah. And so, but if the lifters thought of it like that, we may have a lot more lifters who compete for a long time because of what it gives us, right? Mm-hmm. Like we know what it gives us, and you would compete if you could. Because why else would you? Like if you can, why not? So people don't stop competing who are like us because they want to. It's because they have to. Mm-hmm. It's because they're forced to. Like how many shoulder replacements, and at some point you go, it's not worth this anymore, right? But that doesn't take that away. But most people walk away from the sport because they never thought of it as a long-term thing. It's just something they're doing right now. It's a hobby, and so they miss all the benefits that go beyond that. But in missing those benefits, they miss so much that can be transferred over to the rest of their life.
Yeah, but that's a tough one, right? Because if we go back to 2009, 2010 with you, right? Then there's tunnel vision, with what that is. And we can try our best to like have this conversation with you then, and we're not going to get through, right? Because it's locked in to all-time world record, and that's what it is. Then everything else is tunnel vision into that. And there are some aspects of that are extremely necessary. There are some other aspects of that I think you can look back and say, it could have been better, right? And actually the result may have been better, if certain things were more, balance is a weird word, if certain things were more optimized, relationships, stuff like that, if they were more optimized, better support system, better outcome, right? But that's hard when you're in this tunnel vision where you're here, this is where you're going. Nothing else is going to matter, because that's just the way it is. And then you're not thinking of 2025 at that point. you know, and that's where a lot of the lifters are now, is in that world.
But I think the one thing that I did, and I think people who listen to this podcast, because like certain people will never even listen to this, right? But those who are seeking something, right? You don't learn because you just want to learn. You learn because you feel that there's something to gain from that, right? And so I was lucky enough to have other people, like my experience at Westside, if you hadn't shared about roles and the way there's different roles, and then I didn't get to see that play out, like I wouldn't have been able to survive at Westside. So I think there's like things that you are looking for and advice you will take. But in terms of life advice, you're right. Like if someone said to me, hey, you know, you should probably, you know, attend your brother-in-law's wedding and not train, like I wouldn't have listened, and I didn't, right? So there's life advice, and some stuff you do have to learn the hard way, right? And it's part of your progress, your growth. But I think there is things that, like, you know, I wouldn't have listened to all of it, but I did listen to a lot. And
you did listen to a lot, because you were building your marketing skill set. Yeah. You were building. You weren't just going home and doing nothing. Yeah.
And that's what I honestly, like, I feel as if the majority of top lifters I meet, and it's kind of like, you know, I'm lucky where I've gone into other areas and met high performers in a lot of different, you know, sports, but also a lot of different businesses and things like that. And what you find is that at the end of the day, we're all driven by something bigger than us. And we all do want to like listen to other people, right? Because we're all still trying to figure it out. No matter where we are, we're still trying to figure it out. And so I think that, like, for majority of top people, you make decisions, and sometimes the reason mental health becomes an issue is because, you know, like we go back to what we were saying about just gassing up, right?
Yeah.
In my 20s, I could have known that it wasn't the right thing, and I would have done it anyway because the outcome was more important, right? I was willing to sacrifice. I had the thought process that I don't care if I die doing this, until it became a reality, right? And then it was the break point. But I think that that's something that the people have the awareness. So I think you might not act on it, but if the more you have the awareness, the more it starts to like shape what you're doing. And that's what leads you to those changes and reflecting back. And I mean, it's like diet, right? Like I was on the See It, Eat It diet. I remember you and I had that conversation at 06 Worlds. You know, I stood there and, you know, I struggled to weigh in, and you just looked at me and go, well, I don't see you eating anything. And I was like, what? You're like, where's your candy bars? Why aren't your pockets full? Like, you should just be fucking eating. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is like a job, right? And then, so I was on the See It, Eat It diet, just like eating whatever. And then I met John Wellborn, and, you know, played in the NFL for 10 years, was a big conjugate guy. He came out to Westside for a time, and he was telling me about the paleo diet. But more than anything, all he convinced me was that, like, I should be eating healthier, and that my performance will probably go up if I do that. And so that's when I started, you know, the last year I started experimenting with the diet. And because I needed to keep my weight on, I couldn't eat clean all the time. Yeah. But just switching from all bad foods to like some good foods, like, made a difference. And that's the beginning of a bigger thing. And I think that that's all that you can do when you're looking, like, or you're listening, is, you know, why are you listening? What are you trying to get out of it? And if you can understand that, well, I'm trying to get something that's going to move me forward, then you can start looking at what you're doing. And is there things that I already inherently, and you talk about this, intuition, right? Or self-regulation. Are there things I'm doing that I know are not long-term, they're short-term, and is the short-term benefit a good enough reason to negate the long-term gain if I did it a different way? And there is times to think short-term, like, versus long-term. Like, if you're struggling to pay your bills, you got to think, how do I make quick money? Right? You can't do a 4-year book launch, because, like, you're going to be homeless, right? So, but, you know, you have to understand, by doing this, and it might be taking a third job or something, what does that take away from what I truly want to do, and how do I get back to that? So, you know, I'm not someone who you got to do what you got to do along the way. Same in training environments. You might not be in the best training environment. You might not have an option to travel an hour to train with someone else. Like, that's totally fine. But can you make the best of the situation in that? And then what long-term should we do? And constantly having that to check back to, so that you can make the long-term progress that you desire. Because I think everybody has some vision for their life. They have some goals they want to achieve. I don't think people get into a sport and think to themselves, like, I don't care what I do forever. Like, at some point,
I don't know if that's actually, to a point, I don't know if that's true, because what you're talking about is, making the best of the situation that you're in, right? But knowing that X, Y, and Z can make that situation better, but that's not possible now. But your eye is still on how can you make that possible in the future?
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody is doing that. I think they're just in, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's a problem, right? Because if all they're doing is focusing on those three things, but not optimizing the current situation they're in, there's a problem, right? If all they're doing is optimizing the situation they're in, but they're not looking at how to make that situation long-term better, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So there has to be that dual focus. Yeah. And you had that even back in, from the time you were still in Washington competing, so here's what I have now, but where can I go and how can this become better? How can my life become better financially to be able to pay for more food, whatever you need to, to be able to move.
Always looking at how to close the gap.
Yeah, but you still have to maximize what you have there and not bitch about it. Well, I guess you can bitch about it, but you still have to do the shit to get better.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's something that people could take away from this is the potential to do that, right? It's like, it's phrased different ways, but like I look at it like who is the man I have to become, right? To make me proud. Because that's really like self-torture is just because you're not proud of who you are, right? Like lack of self-confidence because you're not proud of who you are. So like, with what I want in my life with my kids and things like that, I'm checks and balances against that person, that vision I see myself to be. Now, the key to stay sane is to not beat yourself up for who you are, right? The key is, is to accept it. And it's kind of like almost have gratitude for where you are, but be at the same time unsatisfied by it. But it's like, it's okay. Like my life is amazing, but like, I know there's another level, right? And I think that's what keeps you moving forward. And then the understanding though, is that, and I learned this once I broke that world record, I had a lot of thoughts in my head about my life. Like once I become a world record holder, things are going to change. And of course, nothing changes, right? And you'll
gets worse.
Right. But like when you realize that, what then the question is like you have faced with the choice of, well, why do this, right? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It meant something to you, right? But it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, in 100 years, it won't matter nothing. So why do it? But then the other side of it, and this is the beautiful thing of it, is this is never ending, right? And so that question of if I'm gonna work out, because I know that's important to longevity for the rest of my life. The question is, how do I make myself work out? And for me, the answer was powerlifting, right? And so it's like, so I'm never going to stop powerlifting. And that was something that when I left powerlifting, I didn't have that thought process. It was, I can't powerlift because I'm going to be the same way. I'll never be able to not be this person, right? And then coming back to it now, it's like, okay, how do I powerlift for the next 50 years? Right. And that's where your training and everything's effective. You take that same thought process into your work situation and you say, well, if I'm going to do this until I'm 65, because most people are going to retire. Most people have to retire probably when they're 75, right? Or at least scale back. But if you're going to do this, the thing you're doing, can you do it for that long? And if the answer is, no, I don't see myself doing this in my 50s. Like if you're in your 20s, right? Oh no. And it's just a stopgap. It's just a temporary thing. The question is how do you do the thing you want to do, right? And we'll use, like if you want to own a gym someday, but you're not a personal trainer right now working in a gym, like you have two choices. I can either get in the gym and do the thing I love, but I'm not going to get what I want in terms of money and I'm not going to have my own gym, but at least I'm in the environment. So I know I'm going to have fulfillment and then I'm going to build my way there. Or like Corey Gregory, I'm going to go and work to raise the capital to then do the thing I love. And so you have choices, you know, and I think that's, if most people aren't looking at it, that's why lack of progress, we'll just call it that, in all areas. You have lack of progress is because you're not trying to move towards the thing you want. And that's where frustration and annoyance comes in, and anger, a lot of anger, because like you're just living the same life over and over again. And you know inside you that you're not supposed to, right? And I don't know at what point people give up. And I'm sure, I know for myself that, like, you know, a lot of times I've used, you know, drugs and alcohol to distract me from the pain that I have, you know? And it's like, at some point you have to address the pain. Otherwise that's just going to keep going a direction I didn't want it to go. But I think that those are the things that, like, we come back to training, because, you know, that's really where for us it comes out, is that, like, I've realized that, like, when I move, when I'm in the gym, like, that is meditative, right? That is anger management. So it's all the things I want, I get from this. If you don't, that's fine. But, like, find the things you do. And for some people, it's long distance running, you know, like they go on a 7-mile run, 10-mile run for the day. And that's the only way to clear their head, to get set. So they prepare themselves for the rest of the day. And I think that these are the things you have to find out. And this is what most people don't want to do, is you have to find out what is going to work for you. Right. Mm-hmm. You have to find out the routine that works for you. You have to find out the thing that's going to keep, because discipline is for people who, you know, you're forcing yourself to do something, and that you can only do that for so long. If you have to force anything, it can only be for so long. That's a short-term mentality. So what you want to do is, if you are, okay, I'm forcing myself to do this, how do we shift to where this is just natural? Because I've not met anyone successful who is forcing themselves to do that. It's just who they are.
Mm-hmm. With having that thing that basically puts you in a mental space that you don't think of anything else. Right now in the gym, yes, you do think about other things, but there are moments, you know, before a max effort lift, there's moments before certain lifts where there's nothing else going through your head. Yeah. Right. And it's just like a void, a vacuum, whatever you want to call that. And that, I feel, is necessary to be able to use to get away from all the other shit that's going on in your life, right? That, because it's not drugs, it's not alcohol, it's not all the other stuff, because even with a lot of the drugs and the alcohol, all those other thoughts are still there, mm-hmm. right? They're just either subdued or amplified, you know, in some cases. But if it's your mental state before your max effort lift or your mental state in a competition, there's fucking absolutely nothing else there except that. And that break from reality, I think, makes reality easier to tolerate.
Well, I would say something completely different, 100%, but the end of that is reality. Everything else is the story in your mind. And so those moments where you're in the void, that's actually the only truth and reality there is, because that's all that exists. The rest of the noise is just our thoughts, beliefs, like around a certain situation. Mm-hmm. And so to that point, I think the key is to how do you have more of those moments in healthy ways?
Yes. Because
we could sit and watch football on a Sunday and be absorbed in the game, but when that game stops, everything comes rushing back, right? And so, you know, when you're in the gym and those moments happen, that's great. But if all those thoughts come rushing back, we have to say, okay, well, how do we begin to expand the void so that we can be fully present? And I think that, like, the hard thing is that we have so much coming at us now that, like, there's always noise, even if it's not in our own head, right? And so the reason we get into scrolling and stuff like that is because actually that's creating a void.
Yeah.
Right. These addictions that we have to these different things create voids, that in the void we're actually present. And so we actually relax, we feel better. And so that's the key. And so for me, you know, getting back in the gym, it's like, oh, this void creates more voids because, you know, I'm not anxious. My body has moved. Like, I feel good. And you start looking at, like, hey, well, if that's the case, how do I make my whole life this? And, you know, people talk about, like, should you follow your passions and stuff like that? And I had a lot of good conversations. I'm transitioning out of my work, the company that I'm with. I'm just an advisor now to them. And, you know, it's become like there's a corporate structure and it just doesn't fit me. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I've been looking at what should I do? And immediately my head goes to, like, okay, where can I make the most money? Right. And as it's gone, I've struggled to pull the trigger on stuff that I've thought about doing. And I was talking to a couple of people, and my wife actually said this. She's like, it's because you're chasing something that you don't care about. She was like, you don't actually care about the money. You care about what the money gives you. She was like, but I've known you forever. And it, like, if you were fulfilled, you know the money would come. And so what fulfills you, and I always come back to the health and fitness industry, I always come back to strength training, I always come back to that stuff. And what I realized is ever since I was young, and I know it's funny saying because I'm a big guy, but like I've had this thing, like obesity doesn't need to exist. It's ridiculous, especially in kids. It bugs the shit out of me. My sister struggled with it, and there was no help for her. You know, she's stumbled her way through, and you know, she found strength sports and is competing in strong women now. And it radically shifted her life, like shifted her confidence. And I've seen it. So I've had that personal account. Plus, I've just always had this thing. I don't know why, but I've always had this thing. And what I realized is that when I help a fitness professional improve a business, right? What I've actually done is given them the tools they need to change more lives. So what it really comes back to is like, I just have this thing against obesity that for whatever reason I have. And so I always come back, but it's because I'm driven by a bigger thing. It's got nothing to do with the money. And it's also because my people are fitness people, right? And so like, I feel the conversations I have, everything is just like, it fills me, it fills my cup. And so then you go, okay, well, I know the gym brings me the void, but what, and like you've done it, is like, if we can build our whole life around it, we're going to have the same problems I have in day to day with any business, but at least it's in something I fucking love. Mm-hmm. At least when I sit back, it's like, I know that like I enjoy this shit. And you create those moments now. Like I'm sure when you do train with Dave, train your ass off, like for those 2 days, like you're in your element. Oh yeah. Now Monday you're exhausted and you're like, fuck, I got to go do my regular work. But for those 2 days, you created a void that wasn't you under the barbell. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it's like, it's this level of fulfillment that you're like, fuck. And the truth is you would do it for free if everything was taken care of. Sure. Right. But that you never do it for free because it's your livelihood. You know, but like it's that case of like, yeah, I wouldn't fucking do this every day. You know, I can't. It doesn't make sense, but I would. And I think that's what, strength athletes realize through pushing their body, they attain things they never thought possible. And once you've broken the barrier on going beyond what you believed your reality to be, you start to realize that there's a lot of things that you believe that you can go beyond. And I think it's that is, you're a driven human and you're attracted to a strength sport because you're proving to yourself that you can get better, and you can, the measurement is the barbell. So it's actually like if you're trying to improve your relationship, how do you know if it's getting better? Men would say, well, I have more sex. Women would not say that, right? Yeah. So, or majority, I shouldn't use generalization, but in general, right? So like, what's the measurement on a good relationship? Less arguments? Well, not necessarily, because one person might just bottle everything up and not say it, right? So it's hard to measure a lot. In business, we measure it by money, but if we're measuring it by money, Dave, we're failing. I mean, there's trillionaires, so we're failing, but we're F students here, you know. So under the bar, it's easy to measure. It's easy to measure the progress, and then when you have a setback, it's fine because you still can measure your forward progress. And so it's a unique thing that we have to actually see. And then again, it's about how do we create those moments everywhere else.
Well, it's a unique thing that it's one of the main missions of the company is that light, for lack of a better word, that you're talking about that happens when you're in the gym and you're training. All strength athletes and everybody that gets to the point where training's a top 4 priority, it's there, they're doing it. They don't know they're doing it, but all the tools that they need are there. You get injured. First question is, how long is this going to take? And then you start the process of coming back. You get knocked down, you miss a lift. Oh, what do I need to do to be able to get back? So everything's there. It takes a while for them to understand it can be applied in family, business, relationships, and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And my goal has always been to help them connect those dots. Right? Because on a selfish lifter level, if they can connect those dots while they're still on the upswing of competing, they're going to have a better outcome. They're going to be stronger. They're going to have a better relationship with the sport. They're going to have a better top end. It's still going to hurt when it gets taken away, but they'll know no big deal. I've been here before. I can't bench like I used to bench. So I just had to build my squat, or build, whatever it is kind of around that for them to be able to see. And the only aspect of all that I've seen that can be negative is the selfishness, right? Because that's almost required. I would say it is required, for absolutely. That. But in life, it's not, unless they reframe what selfishness really is, because if I use gratitude as an example and say I send out gratitude messages every day, that's actually a selfish thing. Right. Because if I send one to you, I will get something later. Hey man, thanks for sending that. I hope you have a good day. I'm like, oh, cool.
There's really no act that's not selfish.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. But the way that it's framed in a lifter's head is different. Like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm going to do what I have to do to be able to get better. And I don't think this is anabolic related at all, because it happens drug-free, non-drug-free. It's all the same thing. But that's the hardest dot, to be able to connect. But once they do, and some do, I mean, some top lifters that I've spoken to, it's like, holy shit, they got this fucking figured out, to a T. And it's probably why they are where they are. Other ones, it's like, oh, I've seen this before. I know where this ends. I know exactly, and you're the same. It's like, oh, here's where you are. Here's where you'll be in 4 years. Guaranteed. Within 5 minutes, if we talk to the same person for 10 minutes, we're both, yep, this where this is going. Yep. And almost predict within a 6-month period of time, what will happen with that. But the carryover is a huge thing. I want to spin that back to, you said when you broke the all-time world record, it was the greatest thing and the worst thing. But from a mental health standpoint, walk me through that first year.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing, and first thing is you break the world record. Next day, Louis says, let's go to breakfast. So I'm thinking like, we're going to celebrate. I'm a world record holder, So you go to breakfast and it's kind of like when you get a black belt, in jiu-jitsu, now you're just good enough to roll with other black belts. Like, but your journey is just like, now you get to learn. And so that's the first realization is the next morning, Louis is talking about what you need to do. And then it's like, hey, motherfucker, it's going to get really hard. And you're like, why is it going to be hard? He's like, because you're not chasing anyone. Like they're like, you're in a zone of unknown. My thing was I didn't have the squat record, the bench record, or the deadlift record. So I never really thought like that because there was always guys better than me. I was able to talk to Donnie, I was able to talk to Ryan Kennelly, I could talk to Andy Bolton. Like, so I was like, well, there's always something to follow. But what most people don't realize is that when you achieve something that other people want to achieve and that they're chasing, their attitude towards you changes because you've done what and so they naturally, unknowingly project something to you, like it could be jealousy, it's whatever. Very few people are actually like excited for you, right? Louis was, because that's the whole purpose of the gym. What I found with my training partners was that like, I started to like, I wanted that 1205, I wanted 1200 squat. I made the connection. 1205. But the only reason I did that was to get the biggest squat in the gym. But my point is I said, I get, 400 pounds out of my suit, briefs, and knee wraps. So I can either try to figure out how to get stronger, like more out of my gear, right? Or, well, if my raw squat goes up, like 50 pounds, because I've done 1140, but if I can get my raw squat up, then I should be able to do that. So I worked backwards and said, I need like an 800 raw squat to squat 1200. I didn't know if I could do that because we never trained like that. So I tested and I can't remember what I did, but it wasn't over 800. And I was, like you can do it, but like your body's not ready for it. Yeah. So I said, well, okay, well, that's going to be my focus. Every Monday, I'm going to focus on building the raw squat. Well, nobody else wanted to do that with me. So I would, Mondays would come around, I'd roll the team through, and then I was on my own. So you start to have that isolation, right? You start to have that, well, nobody wants to train with you. You start to have nobody understands me. And so you start to go into your head a lot versus talking to your training partners. Like you're not joking around with them the way you were joking before. You develop an ego too. Like, I'm the world record holder, motherfucker. Why are you not doing what I'm telling? Like, why are you not following me? Like there's this annoyance that like, well, who are you? You know, like, so you have this elitist attitude in a way which isolates you even more because, you know, you're coming across as an asshole. And I did. I remember Travis Bell one morning, you know, he came down every Wednesday to train with us. And, you know, he's a bench only guy, but he trained with us full power. So like he earned our respect. But he said to me, like, why you was in a bad mood? I said, I'm not here to maybe be friends with you. You know, like these are my training partners. These are like the people who I understood the most and was the most like. And I'm saying I don't want to be friends with you. Like just weird shit that you do. And so, you know, you start to get to a very lonely place. And then that's when the thoughts creep in, like, why am I doing this? Like, what's the purpose of this? You know, Louis allows you to do it because you're the best, but he doesn't know if it's going to work. So he keeping his distance because, you know,
he doesn't want
if it doesn't work, I told you, motherfucker. But if it does work, you know, he's gonna say, "Oh, what did you do?" You know, and he wrote that I was dragging the sled 4 days a week. He wrote a whole article on it, and then people asked me, I was like, "Well, I did that for like 2 months." You know, like, it's not like I just did it forever. Same with the reverse hyper. I messed my back up. He had me doing reverse hypers 4 days a week, fixed my back, but I didn't keep doing 4 days a week reverse hypers. So, you know, he's kind of like, you know, I'm in an iron what you're doing. Sometimes thinks maybe you're not doing the right things. That he's on your back too. And so for me, that's when the pressure started building. Mix that with, like I said, you know, I was going through a divorce because for me, I think subconsciously I knew how unhealthy I was. I knew the path, like the other lifters in the, you know, Matt Smith, he was training with us, you know, first guy to go 2,500, 2,600, 2,700. For me, Matt was one of the guys like I looked up to, him and Donnie Tom, like all these guys coming up. And so like, you know, now I'm training with him and he's just getting, you know, Louis is just like on his ass because Louis is trying to motivate him to come back to who he was. Matt's trying to be who he was, but you know, he's got injuries and he's struggling. Like he's not able to get where, like, he's not able to do the numbers he thinks he should do. He's putting extra briefs on squat days because, you know, he's just trying to keep up. And I just was like, man, I want to end up like that, you know? And someone, you know, Nick Winters had his heart attack and passed. And so I'm just going like, so all of this stuff starts to become more real, right? You start to get paranoid. You start to like, you know, because of the sleep apnea, you know, and so all of these thoughts come in. And so you go to a really dark place. And the light is if you can hit the numbers, right? It's if you can hit the numbers. And so, you know, fast forward to that, you know, that March a year later when I did the 1205 squat, it's like, I knew the minute I did that, I was like, oh, I'm done. You know, and then I had to finish the meet, almost didn't finish the meet, but it was like, okay, well now what? And then, you know, Louis said, why didn't you stay in the gym? You could have, I don't care if you lose weight. Like I needed you in the gym, you know, and we had great conversations years later. But like in the book, you know, he talks about me being like a night rider. Like I came in, you know, I was only there for 4 years or so, and then I left, you know, but I was also the night rider who did everything he wanted me to do. But at the time, I didn't care about those guys. Like I wanted everybody to do the best they could, but not better than me, you know? So like transitioning to a coach, which is like, if you go to any other country, like athletes, everything, like there's very like career paths for them. Like you get done, you become a commentator, you get done, you become a coach, you know, you like, there's all these things. In our sport, there never was. And now there is, but there never was. And so, you know, I had training partners who had been in the sport for a long time. Oh, you never make money off this. It's never be popular and never do this, never be that. And obviously that's all changed, but I wasn't able to become a coach to the guys in the gym because being in that gym, I just want to be the best there is. Like you can't take that out of the gym. That's the environment of the gym. And so you get to this place where you're just like, well, the only way, I just got to go. Like this is not for me anymore. And the pressure of that, really it's from being the best, you know? And when you look at like, this is why I have so much respect for Dave and for guys who stay on the top for so long, is because I don't know if anybody can comprehend. It's kind of like before I had kids, you know, and then you have kids and you're like, why never tell me about this? It's like, well, we could tell you all you want, but you have no comprehension of this. Like the level of love that there exists, like the fear of someone, like, you know, every day you think your kid's going to die, right? No matter what. So it's like, oh, I know. Well, my mom texts me now, like, let me know when you get there safe. It's like, Mom, I haven't lived at home since I was 16. Like, but there's that level of, you know, understanding you can't even tell somebody about. So, you know, that pressure builds up and like, you have those like thoughts. And so I was so unhappy and I tore everything over those 2 years, you know, leaving jobs and relationship and like all of that, tore that all apart. And then I was like, oh, well, it's powerlifting that makes me unhappy. because I was looking for something outside of me. It wasn't me and the decisions I'm making and the fact that I choose to be a 308 lifter. I choose to take all these drugs. I choose to eat this food that I choose to live this lifestyle. No, it was powerlifting. Powerlifting was making me do this. And so I blamed the sport, and pushed the sport away. And in doing so, okay, I'll go find out how to be normal. And that's just that didn't work either. Because I'm not that person. And I remember watching The Last Dance. And I might have said this on the last podcast. I know a bunch of people won't listen to it. But I remember watching that and being like, oh, dude, Michael Jordan's the man. And then I saw all the reviews and it was like, he's an asshole and clearly anybody like this is, you can't be friends. And I'm like, oh, there's those of us who believe that chasing a singular goal is worth the things we have to give up, and then there's those that don't, and that's okay. We don't have to understand each other. And so similarly to you, I stopped trying to understand why I am who I am. I stopped trying to understand why my life is the way it is, and just accept it and be like, okay, how do I make decisions that will move me forward? Because you don't remove habits, you just replace them. And so easy example is if you're someone who binge watches TV, well, just start listening to podcasts or watching, buy a course and go through the course and learn. You're still consuming, but at least now you're consuming something that's going to help you, right? Versus just entertain you. And I think that if you can start going through all areas of your life and start looking at that, what decisions am I making right now that are hurting is a strong word, but not moving me in the direction I want. And how could I replace that? How could I replace that, right? You don't stop eating when you go on a diet. You just replace what you were eating. So if you can do a food sensitivity test and it says, well, don't eat these foods, it doesn't say you don't have to measure anything. You can just start eating the foods that your body doesn't get inflamed from, and you're going to be healthier. Then once you've mastered that, then you say, oh, how do we go one step further? And so the benefit of that is you make smaller changes versus what we all make the mistake of. I know you've done it too. It's okay, I'm going to do this. And you go all in over here. Yeah. And most people can't do that and commit to that, but we go all in over here. And then we realize, oh, well, this isn't sustainable either. Right. And so we pull back and your new goal, I don't know where I heard it, but you pick the weight you want to be, and then you say, I'm going to maintain this, and then you drop it, and then I'm going to maintain it. You're not going, okay, I'm going to lose 5 pounds every week, which is what everybody wants to do. But it's sustainability and long-term maintenance. That's really the magic. It's is it better to have a company that blows up and does $1 million, but then it was selling a chat ski, so it's going to disappear? Or could you build $1 million business for the next 20 years? You don't need to keep going up in revenue unless you have fucking outside investors and shit, and then you have to, because that's the only way they measure progress. But, if you build $1 million business and then you go, okay, can we sustain this? Can we sustain this and work less? Can we sustain this and reduce our costs? Can we sustain, there's all ways to improve that isn't necessarily the revenue generated. And that's kind of your life. Can you create a life that you love and then sustain it and then make it better, right?
Well, I went through a similar path. So, when I left, it's the same type of thing. I had the conversation with Louis. I can't be I know I can't be here, and hated powerlifting. So the same type of thing. But it would have drove me fucking nuts to be there, for one thing, because I wouldn't be able to do what I wanted to actually do. So that was kind of selfish on my part. But at the same time, I can't formulate in words. You did a better job than I did, right? Of trying to formulate, that separation. Yeah. And then for me, it was replacing the habits. Okay, I just could do this bodybuilding shit, right? Then that became more toxic. It became worse.
Same thing.
Way worse than what I was doing. Then okay, then what's the next thing? So it took a while. It took a long while, so how many years until you kind of got to the position to where you stopped trying to replace, but just embraced what was there?
Well, I mean, it was literally, 2022.
Yeah.
It's so been maybe, so it was about 7 years before I was like, wait a minute, there is something in me that needs to lift heavy weights. If there wasn't, I never could have done what I did. So how do I lift heavy weights, but don't become so consumed with it that I make the poor decisions I made before? And full transparency, it has not been an easy year, like, 18 months. It's not been an easy 18 months to not go back to doing that, right? Like the temptation to just do that and to like neglect my family and to take all the drugs and to like become completely obsessed again is always there. But you have to, oh, well, I've been there and done that. So what would be the outcome of going back to that? Like, oh, that's the repeating of the thing, like doing the same thing over.
I told you earlier, I still fucking do it, but now I have more. I used to have enablers and realists, right? But I would be lying if I didn't say I would lean toward one or the other. Yeah. So it's like, here's the realist. I don't want to talk to them. I'm just going to talk to this person over here. But yeah, fucking do that. So then you just fucking go after it. Where now I rely more on the realist to be like, hell, just last weekend, it's just like, for me, it's Todd Brock's one of them. I'm like, man, you have no idea what I want to do right now. And he does. Yeah. And he's like, well, so we talk it through, what's the pros, what's the cons and all that. And then it becomes a mental game. Like, okay, now I'm not going to fucking do it because I know the easy way is that, where I want the hard way. Right. Yeah. Because that's the more challenging is the hard way. And
that's what I was just saying.
But goddamn, is it still there?
Right. Because,
and it's way more accessible than ever was.
Like going into this last meet, because I've decided I'm no TRT doses only. Right. And I talk to different people and that's even getting crazy because like some doctors is like, they give their people quite a bit. But, yeah. So, I'm not going to do anything crazy, right? Just because, like I said, there's no research on super high dosages. Mm-hmm. There's research on lower doses. So I know I'm in a safe range. I can get blood work and everything like that. I was thinking, just look in the mirror. How do I look? How am I breathing? Like, these are all signs that I'm like, yeah, when I was back then, it was like, you're purple and you could hear your breath. Yeah. So it's like, okay, I know I'm in better health. And then going into this meet, I was like,
but you were ready.
Yeah. But I was like, going into this meet, we'll add some orals in, that'll give me a little bump. But my stomach started getting churned up. And I was like, I don't remember them being this bad. And my wife, she's a sports nutritionist and she does like lab testing and everything like that. Probably sports nutrition is probably not the right thing for her anymore. But she's like, I want to do some tests again. Like it's been a long time since we tested. Let's do some tests. So we did a gut check test, stool sample, everything like that. And she comes back, she's like, you have like mold in your gut and you also not absorbing any nutrients. So like the reason you're exhausted all the time, you're not recovering like as well as you could be is because your body can't even process what you're putting in it. So she's like, these orals aren't doing anything for you. And she's like, part of that too is your liver and kidney aren't working 100%. And so your injectables aren't probably working as good as they could too. These are things I never thought about in my 20s. It would just be like, okay, let's go to 100 milligrams of dianabol a day. 50 is good. Let's double that. And now it's like she's basically showing it's like, well, you could take as much as you want and your body's barely going to pull anything from it. And I think how many guys who thought they had bunk gear, it was just their body wasn't working correctly.
Yeah. You clean all that up and then it's all working way better.
And so the temptation is there. But what I've also figured out is like, these are signs. Right? Why am I craving this? And am I actually doing everything that I could at this level, or is that just a Band-Aid for a bigger issue? And I think that that's something that like you never think about when you're younger, right? But as you become older, these decisions you make, right? Like, well, why am I eating right now? Am I bored? Am I really, really high? So I'm eating because like I'm not in control of my thoughts. And like you can start looking at these things. And I think that's, again, it's just chipping away at the character. It's just making you say, can you be a little bit better every day? Because at the end of the thing, even if you make minuscule progress in a year, over 10 years, you'll be so far ahead of the person who made zero progress. And I think that that's kind of something that those that go all in always kind of have that thought process of delayed gratification, delayed results. Those that don't, and I don't know if you can teach it, but I believe awareness does. Like once you have awareness of something, you can't close your eyes again. Once you've been shown something, you might ignore it, but there is that little voice, there's that little thing in the back. And it's kind of like when you start getting pain. It's the first sign from your body that you're going to get an injury. And you can ignore that, but at some point, if you don't, it turns from, just a pain to a tear to a complete rupture or break. And it's like every person who has anything major happen, if you say to them, when did this stop? There's never the response of, well, what do you mean? It just happened. They blow their quad off. Their quad's been hurting for 6 months. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to learn the difference between injury and pain. But at the same time, back when I was lifting, when I got so stiff, I just took the pinky off the barbell. And then I took the next finger off the barbell. I never thought to myself, well, maybe I should fix my shoulder health, my mobility, so I can, have that barbell on my back correctly, full grip, full activation of all the muscles, because every lift is a full body lift, no matter what anybody says. I just started, taking a pinky. Oh, now we just go to the safety squat bar more than we do a straight bar because I can't get and versus these are signs. These are things we can pay attention to that can make our training better because we can then go in and fix it. And again, it's kind of like, what's the perfect technique? Well, there's the right way to do it. And then there's what you're capable of. And the closer you can get to the correct, perfect technique, so to speak, the better you're going to be as a lifter. But what limitations, what issues, what, do you have? And there's the perfect technique for you right now. And then there's where we can get you to, and so for some people, they're going to have to just grip the barbell with 2 fingers. But if we can get them to fully wrap their hands, they're going to be a stronger lifter. And so these are things that, again, we don't necessarily have to work on the main lift, but we have to work on the muscles that are holding us back right now, because they're not able to either support, they're not able to stabilize, they're not able to help in the lift because we've disabled them through positioning or through placement, hand placement, foot placement. So if we can start to get that all correct, then that will carry over. And so the reason you see people jump, and this is, pretty much same, I know for you can take anyone and probably in a weekend get them stronger.
Oh yeah.
Because all we do is tweak this, tweak that. Yeah. Right. And so that goes to show that getting stronger is not just doing the barbell lifts, because there's so much factors that go in it. And it's the same that goes into life. Look at a relationship. Spending time together is not the only factor on a good relationship. And so you just have to start looking at these other things that essentially are just they're always there. They're red flags or whatever people call it. We just ignore it. And we ignore it because I believe the ego, and it serves you as a purpose, but it also is a dangerous thing, because if you just ignore stuff, or you think you're better than that, or it's not going to happen to you, reality catches up.
It's moving the hand in, brought back a memory where I remember the last meet I was training for, the last 6 weeks, somebody had to jam my right arm under the bar. And I remember one of the coaches that Louis had coming in was like, why are they doing that? And I'm like, to me, it's like, so I can keep my fucking back tight. At no point was I thinking, he was seeing like, this is kind of fucked up. This dude can't get his arm under the bar. And then he has the cooperation of these other guys like shoving his arm underneath there to be able to do it. And then my reply, because he said something like, how bad your shoulder fucked up? Like, well, in the last set's it's good, because I could get underneath there on the last one if they just jammed it fucking under for all those different things. And then it's like, well, after the meet, no big deal. I just go to the safety squat bar and then we'll rest and he'll be fine, for the next one. But it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of, it's 6 weeks, whatever, jam it fucking underneath there. Meanwhile, the bar is fucking crooked, you're twisting, but it doesn't, you look like Panora, but squat way less, from that. Let's take a bathroom break and then we'll come back. One of the best ways that you can support the podcast and your training is to join the crew. When you join the crew, you get an extra crew cast podcast every single month. You also get access to our Discord, which has a training Q&A with Team Elite FTS members. You get form checks. You can upload any of your training footage and have your lifts diagnosed, sometimes within minutes, by multiple people. Access to close to 30 different ebooks, training logs, and first sign up access to our weekend training retreats, train your ass off, and other events that we do. Biggest takeaways from that, though, what people enjoy the most and get the most out of is the training Q&A and the form checks, as well as the extra podcast. Hey guys, I'm back in the gym with another limited edition apparel drop. This is the new Live, Learn, Pass On shirt. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our cambered grip American cable attachment. This attachment has 4 grips and it's cambered. So when you flip it, it actually becomes 8 grips. And if you turn it upside down, there's actually 16. This is one of our most used cable attachments out in the gym. Even got that full range of motion. We got a second limited edition drop this month as well. Head over to elitefts.com, pick up the shirt, pick up the cable attachments, and we'll see you next time.
Merck Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told as part of getting older? You just go to merrickhealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. merrickhealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk.
Okay. We're back. So during the break, you were speaking about your wife going to the world finals. So couple questions there. Recap her history real quick, like you just did, so we kind of know, who she is, what she's training for. But then I want to get into how you're using conjugate for strongman, because that's a question that we get pitched a lot, where it seems to me that, and I've always kind of pivoted away from it because I've never worked with strongman. So it's like, why I haven't done that. So I can just give you ideas, but just kind of leave it at that. But it's kind of best suited for conjugate if you really, when I think it through. So you just change max effort movement. So you said that she was competing up to 2012. Is that right?
Yep.
And then at what level was she at?
So she made the world, went to the world's strongest woman in Scotland and competed there. So she was one of the top, I think it was 185, the category. So there was the heavyweights and then everybody else. Yeah. She was in that category. There's a few more weight classes now in strongman. I think there's 3 or 4. And so, she said she made comments about making a comeback. And then after I started competing again, kind of pushed her into competing. She did a local show. She won that.
And then when?
Earlier this year in March.
Okay.
March or April, something like that.
How old are the kids?
So we have 3 and 5.
Okay.
And so, one of the things, hopefully she don't mind me sharing this, but one of the things I've seen her struggle with is body image since having the kids. It's just having kids changes a female's body. And so, seeing her, like, she was training, so she wasn't not training, but like she didn't have that look that she wanted.
What type of training? I'm just interested because we have a 10 year.
Yeah. So she always was working out, just like, boot camp style workouts, like circuit training and stuff like that.
GPP.
And then she started working after the kids, she started working with Luke Noland, who does mostly kind of like corrective exercise stuff. Okay. So what he does is he kind of does the functional movement screen on you. He has a couple of other things he does. And then he kind of builds his programs around like essentially your weaknesses.
Yes.
Right. So obviously she had a core imbalance. She's always had stability issues in her shoulders and stuff like that. And so for 2 years, she worked with him, essentially like putting her body back together where she felt good.
Building a base.
Building a base again, but essentially correcting all the weaknesses and imbalances and everything she had. So then when she got back into the strongman, her foundation, obviously strength was low, but her foundation, in my opinion, was better. Was much better. And so we never set out with the goal of going to finals or anything like that. Now I said to her, well, it would be cool if you competed at the Arnold, because like then we go together. So I think it would be cool if you could compete at the Arnold. So she started like kind of looking into how to qualify for that. And then this came up, and they had done several in-person qualifiers, but this was unique because they were doing a world online qualifier. And so they had different events you had to compete in, film the whole thing and submit it, kind of like CrossFit does with theirs. And so she said she wanted to do it. I said, fine, no problem. So she did it. And quickly we realized that she was going to qualify for the finals. And so for her, it was like at 39, so last year in the Open, it was just, she's having so much fun doing it. And it's like different than before because she's similar to me where it's like, it's not everything to her anymore, but she has the same all-in personality. So it's been like, she's even said like, after this meet, I'm going to pull back because I got other things I want to focus on a little bit more. And so, but when it comes to training, I had one of our friends is Kristen Rhodes. She's 8 times world's strongest woman, and I had helped her before a little bit with training. So I had thought through stuff, but again, very conceptual. A lot of stuff was conceptual. My training partner Shane, he's a former he's a strongman. He'll go back to strongman. He's just doing powerlifting with me right now, but he's a strongman historian and technical expert. So I knew that, like, I asked him, hey, will you help technique wise, like make sure everything's the way it needs to be for strongman? So I didn't have to learn like the right positioning for a log press or anything like that. But what I basically did was looked at the program and said, okay, max effort, we got max effort on Mondays. Well, if you look at strongman, they don't do a lot of squatting. It's mostly deadlifting, pulling, back, stone loading, stuff like that. So let's consider max effort is going to be geared more to building that right, and then on max effort upper body going to be towards building overhead press. In my years at Westside, I saw Louis take in so many collegiate athletes trying to go to the NFL for the combine test. And we never trained to build endurance on the 225 bench press. He just got them stronger and their bench press numbers went up. It's a sprint, right? So the higher your strength level is, when you use submaximal weights, if conditioning is there, right? We can't neglect that. Yeah. But, these athletes, conditioning is built not under the barbell. So if conditioning is there, your force per rep is less because you don't have to put as much exertion into because you're stronger, right? So submaximal weight, the lighter it is, the more reps you can do. It's just natural. Yeah. So I didn't want to neglect maximal strength. So we still did singles for the main movements, right? Now we picked exercises that, trap bar deadlift, stuff like that, deadlifting off of high blocks and, frame deadlifts, like suited to their lifts, but we had our variations from that, but we worked up to a max and then we would do the repetition work after, right? We would drop down. What variations were there that were not pulling? So we didn't do a lot. Like we would use a safety squat bar, like close stance, low squats. So I try to think back to like, I don't know if it was when you were there, maybe before, but like Louis always said, like, we never deadlifted, because we were deadlifting more and more and more. And, especially on speed days, we were deadlifting speed deadlifts after. But I remember like talking to Billy, talking to Matt, and like there was a time when it didn't seem like deadlifting happened very much at Westside, right? And it was built through good mornings. So we had good mornings. We had safety squat bar, deep squats. We avoided the barbell back squat just because I did dynamic day with the barbell. Okay. But, and then what I did was for accessories, and this is something that like I started doing more after working with John, but for accessories, instead of doing, like all of the, like kind of one accessory for each body part on 2 days, I turned her Mondays into more back work, right? And then speed day into more lower body, legs, hamstrings, quads, stuff like that, so that we could really start to pack on a little bit more muscle, because it's been a long time since she'd kind of done that. Now, how were those trained? Were they trained? If we separate and make two vast differences, like a bodybuilder, full range of motion, a little bit more controlled tempo, or just as a power lifter at Westside, just chest supported rows, just heaving the fuck out of. So I like to do it both. Okay. Right. Yes, so an accessory might be like, pendulé rows, right? Now that's just going to move as much weight, work up to a heavy set of 6 or 8. And then that's that. And then we might turn around and do like chest supported rows, but we're doing it for, sets of 12, 5 sets of 12 or something like that. And I want you to pause and hold it at the end of each one. All right, on the same day. Yeah. And the minute you don't feel it, we've gone too heavy, right? Because we're trying to target that. And so that was really the key, is kind of, and my accessory, my accessory thought process has changed. I wish I had this thought process. I never thought, how does this accessory build my main movement at Westside? I thought, how does this accessory make this muscle group weak, right? So, for example, a lot of times when I'm doing my lats now, I will twist and try to bend the bar just like I would on the bench press so that I'm activating that same, because I'm trying to get that carryover. So for her, she started looking at that. And so, for example, we might pick like stone picks as an accessory movement because it's working the muscles she needs to work to build her stones, but it's still working the back. Right. So we would do that. And so I like to have two to three movements that are more low rep, heavy, kind of, just lift as much. And then, 2 movements at the end, which are higher rep. We might do it for time. We might just go for higher reps, higher sets, Yeah. And that balance works pretty good. And then the same thing on the upper day, we just started with, it was always an overhead press variation. So we did seated presses, we did standing presses, strict, push, and we changed the barbells. And the cool thing is that, we got we train at Grinder Gym. Dave DePue's gym in San Diego has everything you could want for every strength sport. It's incredible what he has there. So we're lucky where we have all the implements. But we use the bamboo bar, the football bar. Like we were able to use the barbells because they're, same positioning. And so we could change the heights and, train off of pins and things like that.
What was your logic in changing the movement? Was it every week, 3-week waves, or to expand on the question, would you go bamboo bar if she looked a little beat up?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is where she struggled with the program because she really wants to know why we're doing everything, and she wants it ahead of time. And I said, well, to do this correctly, I'm not going to know what you're going to do until I talk to you that morning. And so that was tough for her because she wanted to be able to go into the gym and know what she was doing. And a lot of the times, because one of us takes the kids to school and then go to the gym. So we're not at the gym necessarily at the same time. So we'd be having phone calls and I'd be like, well, how you feeling? Oh, okay, this is the movement I want you to do today. And so she actually herniated her back. I don't like to take decisions away from people. And so there was a day that I said she should shut it down, and she wanted to continue and finish the work that I had prescribed, and ended up hurting her back. And so then the case is, are you going to do the meet? Like, are you going to go in and do the contest or not? And well, I'd like to. Okay, then we got to work around that. Right. Yeah. So then we couldn't deadlift. So then we're doing belt squats, and we're adding bands to the belt squat. So it's, how can I still train the muscle groups around everything and hope that the back heals itself and then is strong enough to be able to go to the competition and do it. And luckily we got, she got all the outside help she needed to get her back fixed. And, she's in a place where we think she's competitive. But it was one of those things where it's like, oh, my shoulder is really killing me today. Okay, well, we're not going to do a barbell press because that's going to limit where you can be. What doesn't hurt? Okay, we're going to do a dumbbell press, or we're going to do, neutral grip, dumbbells, or we're going to use the, whatever that big thing is they have. And so that's really where a lot of my level of coaching came in, that like I always say, is that's what's missing from online programs is the feedback in the gym, the daily changes. Templates are great, but they should be considered, you're not getting a program, you're getting a template. And it's actually, who's the RPE guy again?
Mike Toucher.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that because you could see that, like, he's obviously changed when he first started, and I feel like there's like you've noticed, most people are agreeing on more than they disagree.
Oh, always. It's always been that way too, by the way.
But the RPE thing, I never really understood, because I'm like, well, if it's 8, why didn't you say 80%?
Yeah.
Like, why do you got to say F at 8? It's 80%. Like, that's 100% is a 10 and 80% is an 8. Like, how do people know? Like, just prescribe it. But the reason I kind of like that after listening to him was it's an 8 for the day. Right. And I think that's where max effort people forget. So like when I'm watching her, like I'm not going, hey, blow your load today and go until you miss. I'm going, go until I see technique breakdown, and we're going to make a judgment call on whether it's worth doing another rep or if we're going to drop down and now do our repetition work, right? Repetition work is going to be off Prilipin's chart. So we're going to pick a percentage, 80%, 70%. We're going to do it for the optimal reps. Or, you know, we're going to say, okay, drop to this and you have a minute to do as many reps as possible, mimicking.
Yeah, well, the benefit of the repetition work, like what you're speaking there, is you have a pretty good idea of what the 1 rep max is.
Yeah.
Because we're just close enough to 5, it for you 10, to gauge, right?
And so that's where that's coming in. But I also could say to her, how did that feel? And she would give me a number, and in my head I was like, yeah, it looked about that.
Yeah.
So I started to understand the purpose of that. And so, which obviously the days I wasn't in the gym, I would say go until it feels about 95%. And then I want you to drop down, right? You know, and so it gave better communication skills like that, because now when you say 80%, it's a number. But that day you might not be at 100% to be able to hit 80% for the prescribed reps.
Yes.
And so now you're overtraining, or the opposite, you're undertraining, right? And so during this training, we changed every week. It was a weekly thing. I was super on top of it. Talking to Shane about the system, he said, you know, we follow a pretty strict 3-week rotation on our bench where we go full range, partial range, and then future method. And we might be a band shirt, or he'll use a slinger, or we'll do reverse bands, right? But we follow that pretty strict. He's like, and then we have our 3-week waves on dynamic day for squats. He was like, but like on max effort day, like, you know, it's squat, bench, deadlift variation, but it doesn't really have anything to do with anything else in the train. It's just random, right? And so we started thinking, and I said, you know, you should squat the first week of the 3-week wave, because I don't believe in deloads, because like for me, life always happens. I've never needed a deload because there was always a day that I would miss. There was always a time like I would miss. And then on the days I didn't feel good, I just backed off the load. So I've never programmed deloads, right? I understand for some people, they probably need it because they won't quit unless they have it, but I've never needed it. So I don't program them. But I'm like, if you're doing a 3-week wave on the squat, like the mistake, I think, not a mistake, but the thing I think could have been better at Westside was that we didn't test our 1 rep max on the safety squat bar. We just went off of what our squat was and worked up to what we felt was about right. Right. And there's a lot of room for error in that when you don't have a team around you watching you, telling you, go lighter, you know, add this, do that. So what we come to realize was, well, if we just maxed that variation that we're going to do the 3-week wave from, now we actually have the right percentages, like the right number to go off for our dynamic work. And so I started to realize, and like I say, it's just coming, as it's coming towards the end, this has started to come out. I started to realize most people, especially if they don't have the team, they need a little bit more structure. And I think these are the things that like you can start to build in, where you can say, okay, that if you can program almost a 3-week wave for conjugate ahead of time. I think outside of that, it's going to be useless. Right? But you can get about a 3-week wave in there. And then obviously if things happen, you can adjust. But outside of that, it's very, very difficult. Personally, I still believe that I've held on to what Louis said about the body doesn't know how it's getting beat up. It just knows it's getting beat up. I have yet to see a need to like have specialization like with the exact implement or barbell that is needed. Like you have to learn the technique, but once you have good technique, like it's not like you forget. So like, yes, like when we do our circa max, like the peaking phase, like we use a straight bar, right? But I don't need to use a straight bar for 12 weeks. I can use it for 4 weeks and I'm good. Right? Because my level of where I am. So if I'm a beginner, it's different because I need to get to that point where I have the right technique. And so with her, like with the strongman, like her implement training, the things she was good at, we did less of. And the things she wasn't so good at, we did more of, right? So for one of their events is this dinny handle, it's a load and carry. And so she's going to be walking with the dinny handles. Now, the dinny handles are both different sizes. So we needed to get the implement to practice that, because how do you practice grip strength? Like if you don't have this, it's like a tiny piece of metal that you got to hold on to. So get the implement, practice the implement. But it was less because I didn't feel like like I felt like that's the separator when you go to a meet. And I'll use geared powerlifting as an example. You and I can both bench 500, and I can go to a meet and bench 900 or 1,000 pounds, and you could go to a meet and bench 700. Because the separator is my understanding of the gear, and then the difference between my bottom and top end strength compared to you. And you know, remember I came here and did that board press with that single ply bench shirt, and everyone was like blown away. And it's like, well, my top end, like I benched 700 off of a 3-board raw before, like, but I couldn't. If I took 700 my chest, it would blow my pecs off. So the separator is, you know, obviously strength on the strength curve, but also how much I can get out of my gear from what I know. So when I looked at strongman, the separator is the comfortability under the implements. And that's where Shane came in, and I would say, hey man, we got this weird block thing. Like, can you work with her on how to do that correctly? And so she spent a lot of time figuring out the correct movement patterns for the lifts that are coming in competition. And then I worked backwards from that and said, how do we strengthen that? Like, because, you know, if one of the events is a yoke press, well, we got a giant camber bar. That's going to mimic a similar thing. We got a bamboo bar for the shake, you know? So if we can build stability and strength when you go to use that yoke that does the same thing, I don't need to practice with that yoke every week because it's 170 pounds. How do you warm up for that? Right? Well, I got the giant camber bar. I can warm up on that and we can go over to the yoke, or we could just, you know, max out on that because it transfers over. And so that was really what I was doing a lot of was looking at, well, what muscle groups are weak that are limiting that top end strength on those movements. And that's how we picked out each week. And I heard Matt Wennon say this about how he'll see something, and so they'll do it for 2 or 3 weeks and then they move on to the next thing. So that's kind of what, like, especially with accessory exercises, kind of looked at it and said, okay, let's spend like 2 weeks trying to build that weakness and let's find out what that next bigger weakness is. And it really has worked. And, you know, not only has her strength come up, you know, she's dropped down from 180 something to like, she's going to compete at 160. She's 165 this morning. So she's right on track. She doesn't have to do a big weight cut. And, you know, for her at 39, it's like phenomenal. She's like as strong as she was a decade ago.
Yeah.
If not stronger in certain areas.
Well, the one difference when you're dealing with different bars and even different exercises is when I was at Westside and when you were at Westside as well, you know, we were able to change max effort movements and on a dime. We could change them all the time because we never became not acclimated to that bar. Yeah. Where with some people, if you throw a new implement or a new bar or even a new exercise, the first week they're still trying to figure out what the fuck they're doing. Right. So they need a week just to kind of get acclimated into how to do it. Like a cambered squat bar is a great example, right? Because they're all over the fucking place. And, you know, they can max out on it. That's great. You get an overload stimulus, but the next week they can usually just do way better because now they know what to expect, you know, from that, where the more experienced a lifter becomes, the less they need that. Because it's like, okay, after the first couple of reps or first sets and 135, you're like, oh, I remember this fucker now. Doing, you know, pull my shoulders tight. You know how to get reacclimated to that, where I think a lot of beginners to conjugate fuck this up a lot, especially if they're changing bars around because they're not acclimated, you know. So if they've never used a safety squat bar, they throw that on. It's just, it's a clusterfuck.
Well, and I think that's something I think that it's tough because we think about this stuff once we've gone through those phases. Yes. Right. And we don't get very many beginners, right? The guys I've worked with, they might be beginners to conjugate, but they have a foundation of strongman or powerlifting before that. So I'm not really getting a beginner. I'm getting more of an intermediate lifter. And so when you introduce these new stimuluses, they make progress because they've been stagnant, but they have a solid base. So they kind of already have the foundations down and that. Hypothetically, and I say that because I don't work with young kids or anything like that. If I was going to work with someone who is new, obviously you have to build a foundation, but I wouldn't do it not using conjugate. What I would do is just keep the straight bar in and use the variations with a straight bar. So like bench press, we would have our close grip, we would have our medium, we'd have our wide, but we would have maxes on those, you know? So we're using that barbell. We would use repetitions, 5s, 3s, and 1s. But again, max effort day, I might not even call it max effort day because I'm going to shut them down before they go to failure. I don't want them to miss. I don't believe in missing. I don't think it helps you.
And you're shutting them down because they're technical breakdowns so bad.
And that then exposes, okay, these are the exercises we're going to do. And then when we see that going up, and then I would add in the accommodating resistance before I probably change the barbell.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't need to change a lot of stimulus, especially with beginners. I remember I look back, like you don't have to change a lot to get a lot, right? And so it's kind of like steroids. Steroids are a trump card, right? But if they're, if we have technique, we have size, body weight, steroids, equipment, like all these different things that translate to strength. I mean, steroids are one thing, right? You're going to get the biggest gains when you start, and then you're not really going to get many gains at all, right? And I think that's the hard thing for people to understand, is that it actually helps you recover, which helps you then go harder. But like in terms of like, it's not like you're going to get 100 pounds a year because you take juice, right? That you're going to get an initial jump and then it's going to kind of plateau. Yeah, it'd be great. Right? I'll just do more, right? It doesn't work like that, right? So I've heard you say, and the same advice is like, you want to kind of hold off as long as you can, because then when you add it in, you get that jump, but you've already kind of, if you can maximize your human potential without it, then you add it in, it's going to do that. Whereas if you use it here, then later down the road, it's like you might have to maximize your diet in order to get the same kind of improvement. And that's harder.
Yeah.
Right. So do the hard thing first. And then when you add the easy things in, it's like gives you that bump. So with training, I kind of look at the same thing. Like you don't need to go to the extreme of conjugate that like we were at Westside.
Yeah.
Because at Westside, we were the top trying to get this slight edge, right? So work backwards. You want to do the program, but with a little variation as you can get away with.
Yeah. I mean, to your point with steroids being the ace card, what people forget is there's a king, there's a queen, there's a jack, there's a 10, 9. There's a lot of cards that fall before that. And if you don't, you can make progress on all those different cards that technique. Well, we've seen this just in fixing people's techniques in seminars and stuff like that. There's no way that you can have somebody come out for a seminar and add 100 pounds to their squat. Yeah. They didn't get 100 pounds stronger, right? And they could be used in stuff. And it's like, in my mind, that's so confusing to me. Yeah. It's like, so you've been pounding shit for 3 years, right? Been putting 15 pounds on the lift each year for 3 years. And now we fix your technique and you added 100. Maybe you should have added the 100 like before that, and then. Because who knows because it's 100 initially, but then what could you got out of it because you were now in the right position. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about when you add stuff in, right? So like adding the accommodating resistance, like you don't necessarily need to add that until you get to a sticking point. Right. So you can, if I was building a program for a complete beginner, what I'm going to do is get away with as little variation as possible. I'm going to have variation because I know I need new stimulus, right? I know that I could do the same thing for 3 weeks, but then it's going to diminishing returns. So we have our fundamental laws, but we don't need to and to be honest, if you're working, say, with a female like lifter who's never you're not going to be able to bench with bands. Because the bands are going to be too much on their own. So what are we going to do? Start getting like micro bands just so they can use bands? There's no point in that. Like what that foundational number is, we don't know because we don't have a big enough sample to say like, oh, at this strength level, you would add that in. What we do know is almost everybody who's been successful with conjugate, right, at the top level had some kind of foundation. Right. Even Hoff was a football player. So but he wasn't like straight off the streets. Like, I'm sure there was some lifting, and then he came in, and Bob customed his program from the jump. From the jump. Yeah. And I remember Louis saying, oh, Bob shuts him down too early. Bob does this, Bob does that. What Bob was doing was self-regulating for him based on what he thought. And I don't know where Bob came up with this stuff, probably just being in the gym as long as he's seen it all. But he did a phenomenal job making Dave do the things early in his career that built the foundation so that now he doesn't have to train every single week, balls to the wall, to get better. Like he understands his training, understands what he needs to do, when he needs to do it, understands where he needs to be. But he had Bob regulating that. He wasn't thrown in with the group like everybody else, just doing what everybody did, and I think that that's kind of the biggest thing that, and like you said, the mistakes people make. And most of the time when I hear people talk about like, oh, I tried conjugate, it didn't work, and they explain what they did, you're like, that's what? Like, who programmed this? Because that ain't conjugate. Like that wouldn't be a beginner program. Like where was the sled? Where was the reverse? Like where are all the foundational movements? Right. And kind of like, I know Wendler with the 5-3-1, but the concept of 5-3-1, you could do that in the conjugate system. The concept of compound movements over, very minute
stuff. You could do that. And I think that these are the things that people need to think about. And like, where am I right now? Like, what's my level, skill level, whatever? And then what do I actually need to stimulate growth, stimulate improvement? Because less is always more. And we learn that in life. Like you don't, the more you do up front, the less you have to do, the more you do up front, the less you have to add in the future. Right. And so if you start out and you go straight to multiply and you do all of that. So okay, cool. Like you were 225 bencher, you put a shirt on, you bench 500, 600, whatever. At some point you got to go back and build your raw strength. And so that like, go back to my training with the band shirt. Like, you know, I tested my raw bench when I first came back. It was 375 the first day I tried it, right? So yes, I'd lost strength, but I was still strong.
Yeah.
You know, like my base 375, right? So, you know, what do I need to bench 1,000? I was like, oh, probably 600 pounds based on what I was getting out of my phenom, right? And so I was like, band gives you a little bit more, but I'm probably a 600 pound raw bench. I started talking to people. They're like, probably like 500. And I was like, oh, okay. And you know, it's different. The shirt doesn't carry over to the top as much. You actually need even more top end strength, but off the chest, that thing's, you know, and you see with light weights, like people are struggling to keep up with the shirt. So like at first I got into that, like, oh, I got to learn the shirt. And so I was going every week in the shirt, and, you know, I was using a Widowmaker on speed day so I could handle heavier weights. And it worked in the beginning, but then I kind of hit a plateau. And I was talking to my training partners and I was like, I don't think I'm getting stronger. That's the problem. I've learned the shirt now. I know how to get the most out of the shirt, you know, and I benched 915. I came back and I did 915, then I did like 920, 925, 931. So I benched PR, but like, okay, I'm getting 500 pounds out of the band shirt or whatever. You don't know exactly what you're getting. That's the mystery, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, let's try to focus on getting my raw bench over 500, right? Because I know that I'm going to get the same out of the shirt. Right. I still got to build my top end, but I can do that on accessory work. And so I started getting out of the shirt every week and found that for me, every third week is about as much as my body can handle, you know, because like the small little nagging injuries. And because when you're handling weights so much more when you put the shirt on, like, it's not muscles that don't recover. It's joints, it's tendons. It's like, you know, it's like these little like aches and pains. And so I was like, about every third week is about as much as I can handle and then still get stronger. Right. And so I started building my raw bench back up, and I was going over 500, either straight weight or combination, you know, bands, chains, whatever.
How did that look like? I mean, how did you build that back up?
So basically just staying out of the gear, like, and then on speed days. So now I'm very explosive. I've always been very explosive. And so I started to experiment on speed days. I said, well, if they move to 5x5 on squats, what if I tried some more repetition stuff on my speed days? So I started doing that. And so what I've done is I kind of have a 3-week wave on my speed where the week after I've been in the weekend after I've been in the shirt, I'm still really beat up. So I use the bamboo bar. The next week, I'll do repetition stuff. So a heavier percentage for, you know, 5x5. But I like to play with repetitions. I don't like to do the same every time.
What's the rest?
So I try to still keep it to a minute to 2 minutes. But with the repetition stuff, I find I need almost 3 minutes to like not fatigue throughout the week.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, is because there's accumulated fatigue. Right?
Yeah. So about 3 minutes, and I'm able to perform those reps the way I want to perform them. And then the third week, I'm doing the speed, which is the week before I'm going in the shirt. And, you know, because I still believe you need explosive training. Now, every rep I'm trying to be explosive. It's not like I'm moving slow. And you've seen the way you're supposed to perform speed is perfect repetition. It's not as fast as you can, shitty technique. And so I'm getting away with only doing speed every third week, you know, for the bench. But it's mostly, so how can I recover so that when I do the shirt work, I get the most out of it? Because the worst thing I want to do is do a shirt workout and it be shit. It's just wasted a whole freaking week, you know, and I got
a month.
Yeah. I got to wait another month before I'm in the shirt again. And you know, it's interesting because I see all these guys going in their shirts all the time. And the reason I came to this conclusion, I'm going to take Jimmy off the table because Jimmy is the perfect lifter, perfect example.
Well, with him, keep in mind though, that he's built that that work capacity over years to be able to do what he does.
And most people also don't realize he's twice the width of any powerlifter I've ever met. I've never met any as wide as Jimmy. So when we look at everybody else, so I'm looking at all these guys who are in the 1,000-pound club, and I'm noticing that in the last 3 years, none of them have benched PRs. And I'm going, looking at their training, they're all in their shirts every week. And I go, it's the same as what happened at Westside. The bench only crew, they were training their shirts all the time, and they'd go to meets and bomb out, and every now and again they'd get a PR, right? But it was few and far between. And Louis would count how many meets had happened before people had done it. And so I talked to Dave, and Dave kind of laughed. He's like, dude, we figured it out. You don't need to do anything different than what we did. And so other than changing that speed work, like I do the same 3-week stuff. And if I'm not 12 weeks towards a meet, I don't put the band shirt on. I'm doing reverse band, right? As I get into the 12-week phase, I know I got to get in my shirt 3-4 times before the meet, and I work down on boards. So, the first time in that shirt, I might do a 3 board, then the next time's a 2 board. Now, what I will say with that, you guys published his article on board pressing, is that it's not if you're hitting PRs on boards and you don't know how to touch in your shirt, you're probably not going to PR in a meet. The other thing is, and I haven't experimented with this, but time under tension is very, very important. And so if you're doing a 3 board and you hit a big number, remember that's only half the time under tension that you're probably going to have in a bench press shirt. So
how do you mitigate that?
That's where I think the repetition work comes in the shirts, right? So, dropping down, doing repetition work, just like you would raw, drop down, can come in. The other side to mitigate it is to use the bands, because you're not relaxing. Like, if the shirt is doing a bit of work, like you kind of can coast with lighter weights, coast through. The reason I like bands is actually for the warm-up sets, right? Because you can't take 135 out with double mini bands and just cruise through. Like, it is work. It is work from the beginning. And so I think that increases your ability to push through to lockout. As I've never had a problem with it, I've never had a problem with hitting numbers off of boards and then not going to a meet and doing it. Like, have a lot of awareness around, like, I've never had to figure that piece out, but I see so many people making that mistake that I think that, what I would probably suggest for them is first of all, you got to be able to touch light weights in your shirt. If you can't find the lightest weight you can touch, and that's like when we did the last man standing.
That still goes back to the multiply shirts though too.
Yeah, and that's like, it's like if your solution to touching in a shirt or breaking parallel in your squat is just add more weight, you have a problem, right? You have a problem from the get-go. And I did learn how to touch in a shirt from Sebastian Burns. He came out to Washington. I went to a seminar, and at the time I was benching 700 in the Rage X, and he taught me how to touch 225 in it. And so a lot of people don't ever figure that piece out. And again, it goes back to, once you figured it out, you don't have to try to learn it again. So you can get away with the board pressing because it's not taking away from learning how to touch. I'm board pressing just like I would if there was no board there. And I think that that's kind of what people, so you have to look at it like, maybe boards aren't the best main movement for you. Maybe that's a secondary movement. Like you do your bench and then you go into your board presses, or maybe you do your max and then you drop down and do repetition work in the shirt so that you're getting the additional time under tension. But you have to train the body to be able to squeeze through. And that's why I pick bands over chains any day of the week. People always say, well, don't bands anchor you? And I go back to what you said earlier. Like, I've never seen anybody who's never used bands stand up and just be locked in. They're fucking shaking everywhere. Yeah. So I think it's like, you can get too good with them. You can learn how to cheat with them. Especially if the bands aren't centered, right? There's ways to cheat with the bands. Same on board presses. Like, I don't do my board presses to my belly anymore because I'm not touching my belly in the shirt. So I'm making sure that like I'm coming down the same line as I would if I was in my band shirt. Go back to if I was a raw lifter, I'd be doing my board presses in the same line that my bench press is. If I come down and sink into my stomach, then my board presses are going to be like that. If I come down, touch and go straight up, then my board press is going to be like. So those are the things I change a lot with the different lifters. And what I'm looking for, on the bench press is like, my guys is like, when they drive their feet, does that energy transfer through to their hands? Right. And so arm position, wrist position, that's all subjective. Shane has very small hands. He can't actually wrap his hand around the barbell. So he has to slightly cock his wrist back, which I know he's losing strength doing that, but he's dumped the weight on him so many times from having that problem that this is the adjustment. We have to move it away.
Mm-hmm.
But I know in an ideal world, I would straighten his wrist up. Right. And so these are the little things that you look for. But with the band shirt, it's like, you have to take in, again, it's like, I want to be in it as little as possible, because on those days I don't get stronger. I know I'm not
You're
getting
testing your
I'm
strength.
testing where I am. I'm measuring where I am. And you asked me this question on the last podcast about how do you know the difference between a builder and a tester? And I answered it kind of roughly because I was trying to think it through in the head. What I've actually come to the decision is that the testers are literally Circumax and like board presses for me. Anything else is not a tester, it's a builder, because I don't know, like when I do a floor press with chain, like I don't actually know what my raw bench is. So it's not a tester because I have no clue. Now, I know that certain lifts, like, I'm getting stronger versus other ones. It could just be a good day or whatever. Yeah. But I realize I'm like, oh, no, a tester tells me gives me the confidence for when I go to a meet. So I kind of redefine my idea of builders and testers, because I'm like, oh yeah, like I want to test to make sure I'm on the right path. And but like, with the deadlift, we could do a deadlift off of two mats, which is like three. I think a mat is 1.5 inches, so 3 inches. I know I can pull that off the floor. For me, if I can pull it off a 2 mat, I can pull it off the floor. Same on the bench press. If I can bench it off a 2 board, I can bench it off my chest. I've never had that problem. So these are things I can consider testers, because they actually tell me what I could go do at a meet. So I kind of redefined my thought process around that after our last conversation, because that's really, for me, a tester is just telling me, is my competition lift going up? And so the reason I don't want to be in my gear that much is because like I want to spend the time getting stronger, because at this level, I'm not going to get much more out of the gear. I know if I go to, because I'm using a 3-ply band shirt, every time I go to a 4-ply, it's not good news. It doesn't work for me. I know Jimmy is doing good with it, but I'm like, okay, I know I'm getting, at least 400. I benched like plus 550 2 or 3 times, but with bands at the top or chains at the top. So I always just say my raw bench is like 500 right now. So I'm getting 400 plus out of my band shirt. That's not going to change, right? Like I'm not going to get that much more out of the shirt. I might get a little bit more with some tweaks and some customizations and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get it much. And if I do, I'm going to get it one time and then it's going to stabilize. So the only difference now is getting stronger. Like that's all I have left is to get stronger. So I don't want to be in the gear that much because I want to be able to get stronger. But if I'm going into competition in those last 12 weeks, I'm getting in that gear because I need to make sure that like I haven't forgotten or that I haven't gotten too big or something like that.
One of the other variables that I'll adjust if it's a 3-board, 2-board shoulder saver, for some people a floor press, depending upon, if it's touching, like for you, it's probably touching your chest, but some there's a gap, is I'll have them hold it for, an extra 2 count before they lower it. And then after they lock out, I'll have them hold it for 3, 4 count. Yeah. It's not the same as a double or a triple or anything like that, but it adds a little bit more of that time under tension aspect. And for a lot of multiply and band shirt guys, their lockout, I don't want to say it's not truly a lockout. It is a lockout, but a lot of their elbows and shit like that really don't allow for, a full hyperextended position. So they're actually here, which is loading the shit out of the triceps too, from that aspect.
I don't know how they hold it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I go like, man, I wish I could do that. Right. Like, and I've tried to figure out, is it the shirt, the way you put it? And it's like, no, that's their limitations.
Yes.
But to that point, I hold every time I hand out, I hold it. Just like if I was at a meet and needed a start command. Now, I know there's federations you don't need a start command, but even when I compete in the IPA, I hold my bench. And so I think that helps.
I think everybody should do that, raw, multiply or not, even because it's a good habit. Yeah. Because if anything, you gotta give it time for the shoulder and for the pad.
Yeah. And if you're not in the right position, you can know right away. Whereas if you just come straight down, you don't know. The other thing is, and I say this with passion, like, if your spotters are holding the bar, you are probably not going to get that lift in competition. And again, there's research to prove that just a finger on the bar gives like, I think it's like 20%. It's like it gives a huge carryover regardless of what you think. Now, you say, well, it's safety this, safety that. Freaking use some spotter pins or something like that. Like, you know, be close, but don't touch, because not only does it actually help, without the person holding the bar is not thinking to themselves, I'm going to help you, right? But if you get out of the groove and you like push it in their hand and it kind of bounces off their hand, well, that stops you from bailing. Now in competition, you remove the hand, you do the same thing because your body didn't realize that wasn't the right position, you're dumping it. Yeah. Right? And you see this all the time, guys. Go to competitions and it's scary to watch them lift. And you go watch their training videos and their spotters are, you know, holding the plates, holding the bar. And so I get why people are doing it, because we're using weights that are way over what we could without the equipment. But I would say, have your hands under the bar, don't touch the bar. Have your hands under the plates, don't touch the plates. Use safety pins. Like, create the safety you need in another way, because at the meet, you don't have it, right? And again, if you're not training for a meet, you don't have to worry about it. But when you're training for a competition, right, not that you get to the same, like you're not in the same mindset in training as you are on the meet day, but in terms of the barbell, the equipment, like when you show up, you never know the meet conditions. And so, you know, in training, you need bad handoffs, right? You need the 3-man handoff. And when they let go, that it teeters where you have to correct it. If you never get that in training because your guys are always holding the bar in a perfect spot for you, you go to that meet, you get your handoff, they let go of it. And all of a sudden your body's going, what is going on here? And so these are just little things you can kind of, you know, like you said, practice perfection, and you don't necessarily have to do the repetition work. If you increase your time under load, and they used to do that for squatting. When I started training with Brent, that was one thing he did was, you know, he would load up the barbell and just stand up with it and just hold it there and just hold it and get used to picking heavier weights. And you see all the time, and the sport hasn't changed that much in what you see. There's just more of it. So it feels like there's more bad lifts. It feels like there's more bad calls because there's just more people competing. But the reality is that, like, I see so many lifters who never lock out when they stand up with their squat. And then the monolift swings in before they've ever locked out. Now they get lights for it, but what happens when they go to the World Championship or they go to the WPO where they have judges who are more strict in holding to the standard. That's all it is, because it's not just your gym buddy or something like that. They bomb out and then they get pissed at the judges, right? Never associating the fact that the lifts that they got were a local meet with like a training partner who, if it's close, they're always going to give you the benefit of doubt because it's just human bias. We would all do it, right? Yeah. And so you're actually hurting yourself without knowing you're hurting yourself by not doing these things. And so you need to practice standing up straight, you know, on the squats and not, you know, swinging the monolift. You should tell whoever's running the monolift, when I stand up, don't swing it in right away. Like, because it doesn't happen at a meet. And you see people falling forward all the time at meets. And even at Raw though, because, you know, I'm just a fan of the sport. Unlike you, I love to watch the sport. Like, and so these big Raw meets that are happening, like I watch and people are bombing out on the squat. And it's like, how did you pick an opener that was too heavy for you? But it's not that the opener is too heavy. It's that the conditions are different. And, you know, they're standing up with in the monolift and they're not used to, you know, not having someone underneath them, you know, like stabilizing them, or they're not used to having, you know, spot. So it's just super interesting. Like, you see people make those mistakes. I saw a guy bomb out on the deadlift at a local meet recently, you know, and he had a huge squat, a huge bench. I'm like, he couldn't hold on to the barbell. And I said to him, did you ice your hands? He's like, why would I ice my hands? I was like, your hands are probably full of blood, you know, because you never do 6 lifts before you deadlift it. Like 6 max efforts before you deadlift in training. I'm like, you're so inflamed in your hands, just dump him in ice and let him go down. He's like, I've never heard of that before. And I'm like, well, there you go. Like, your next meet, you'll be fine. But these are things you learn in meets, right? And this is why meets don't matter, because they're just learning. Like, every meet you learn something, you make it better. And, you know, every 5 years you have the perfect meet. Yeah. But it's like, you have to have these experiences. So go back to training, like, you need to practice those little things like holding the barbell, locking out the weights, and you need training partners who call you on that too. Right? You need someone who can tell you that you're high, right? If your hamstrings don't break parallel, there's no way your hip crease broke parallel. I don't give a shit what you say. Telling me you're going to get it on meet day, that's just ignorance. And the thing is, if you don't have a training partner there to tell you that when you're doing it, well, it's a wasted training session because you just squatted every set high, and that's where the box squats, I think the most underutilized tool in raw training is the box, because I think people think you set it at like parallel. Whereas if you look at raw lifting, like if you're a close stance squatter, none of them, they all leverage the bounce out of the bottom, right? None of them pause in the hole and then stand up, right? So with the box, you're going to want a very low box, right? But you're using it to gauge. You're not going to sit on it to rock back. You're not going to do all of those things. You're going to adjust. But for most lifters, if they don't have that box set, they'll cut lifts high, especially when it gets heavy, and they won't know because nobody says it, right? So I think that's these are training tools and things you can do to make hold yourself accountable to the standard. And then when you go to a meet, and this is when I first went to Westside, Dave and I started squatting on the foam, right? So we had our boxes and then we put the foam on top, and then we both bombed out of the meet because we were on depth. And Louis goes, well, you didn't lower your box before you put the foam on it. And we go like, well, the foam compresses. He's like, but it doesn't compress 100%. He was like, bring the box down 1 to 2 inches and have the foam on top. So we did that. And the next meet we both went and PR'd. And so these are like, again, the meet was kind of a reality check for us. And then we had to go back and adjust the training, but it was a simple change. Whereas if you go to a meet and you bomb out for going high, and nothing in training then gets adjusted, like you're just going to keep repeating the same thing. And you see lifters who do that, and because they don't have the training partners, number one, who will be honest with them, and they don't have the feedback, number two, from the equipment. So I think these are kind of things people can, even if they don't ever want to do the traditional Westside thing, they can take these elements. And I hate that people, it's kind of, what's that saying? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what people have done with specialty bars, bands, and chains. They go, oh, it's conjugate, it's Westside, doesn't work for, it's like, it's just basic strength principles here. We're not, how you put it into a program, I don't care. But like, you need max effort, you need dynamic effort, you need repetition method. Oh, hey, by the way, accommodating resistance really helps. Changing the barbells really help, especially if you get injuries, you can work around injuries so that we can continue to build strength and train. And you go, you could put that into a linear periodization program without any problem.
So with the box squat, and if it's the strongman or raw lifters, where do you want the shin and knee angle?
Yeah. So now in strongman, they rarely squat in competition.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not too worried about trying to like build the close stance raw squat. But what strongmen never do is train wide, because they're not allowed to sumo deadlift. So they don't deadlift sumo, and they sure as hell aren't squatting like that because they never hardly squat. So when they do squat, they're going to be in kind of the strongest natural position for them. So on the dynamic day, that's when I do wide stance squats. And it's not as wide as like touching the monolift, but I want to build the hips. Again, research has shown a wide stance builds a close stance. Close does not build wide. So we're neglecting muscle groups by not ever training wide. Now, does that mean that we do all of our stuff wide? No, not at all. We're not deadlifting in the sumo or anything like that. Now, I always had success when my conventional deadlift stalled. I'd switch to sumo, and my sumo would go up and my conventional would go up. And then when my sumo stalled, I'd switch back. So I do believe there is a benefit to that. But like there's, if you're squatting wide on Fridays, you don't need to squat the deadlift, And so again, I'm looking at like, how do we get you stronger in areas you're weaker? And as long as it carries over, I'm fine. If I saw a point where it wasn't carrying over, I wouldn't do that. So going back to raw, I would have raw guys do wide stuff, but it would not be on, max effort day would probably be their competition stances and stuff like that.
So it'd be a supplemental thing.
Dynamic day. And again, we have to look at what our biggest purpose is. If our biggest if technique needs work, we're probably going to do dynamic day in the same technique as our competition squat. If we don't need technique work, because it's solid, I'm going to look at how do we maximize dynamic day to make you stronger, right? And so we might do what we do on bench day, where we move our feet. So we might have a close stance, medium. So instead of doing just wide stance the whole day, we do close, medium, wide. And these are things that like, I wish I had the opportunity to talk to Lou and say, did you experiment with this? Did it not work? Or was it just something we just never did because, we
used to do that.
Yeah.
On our dynamic work, when I first got there, we would use 3 different stances when we squatted. Close, medium, wide. And then we kind of just like the bench, you just kind of move it through. Then over a period of time, it just all stayed wide. But that was before we were doing max effort work. close to a lower box. So it kind of balanced out with all that.
And that's what I think you have to look at. You have to look at the overall program and what you're getting in. And again, you only have so much time. So if you're doing close stance on Monday, you don't necessarily need to repeat it on Friday for technique. You can mix it up. And it's interesting because I did the opposite with, we wave the squat still, but we don't wave I don't wave my benches, so every week it's the same, when I was doing speed, it was the same 35%. We just changed the bars and accommodating resistance. So I think these things are stuff that has come and gone and like we don't know necessarily. Sometimes it doesn't get thrown out because of injury. It just seems to work better for you. So you just stick to it. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of going back to it. It's like, for Raw and for with Jenny, I'll have her change her squat stance because, this isn't to carry over directly to the squat. We're more of like with athletes, right? Like with an athlete, you're not necessarily trying to get them just stronger, right? So you have to kind of look at what you're doing and what the carryover is where you want it. But again, I always just go back to this, like the beauty of conjugate is really what we're doing is looking for weaknesses and trying to figure out how to get those weaknesses stronger. There's no, we don't look at the barbell and say like, oh, how do we get you to have, like we put you in the position and your body goes out of position. We don't just say, okay, keep squatting to get in better position. Glutes are weak. All right. What exercise can we do to strengthen the glutes so that when this happens, your body doesn't go to that bad position? Oh, you really lean forward on the squat. How do we get you to stay more upright? Okay. Maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it is mobility. So we have to go fix your mobility. We can't just keep squatting you. You're not suddenly going to get mobile from like loading the squat. And that's something that I think like Louis joked about, like warming up under the barbell, stretching out under the barbell, but it doesn't, right? Your body goes where it wants. Your body will move to the strongest, safest place for it. Right. And so like if you start to get out of position, that's because your body is moving it away from something that felt there was going to be an injury. And so like with all of the things I do, I'm always looking at what is the weakest link in the chain and what movements are gonna work on that. And
well, I think with dynamic work that it's been interesting to me because I think people use too much weight most of the time.
Always.
And when I first came to Westside, it's the weight that I used with a 550 bench was 405 for a speed work. And I mean, he was using Perlman's chart. So it was basically around 70% for what it was. Now, over a period of time, it got to the point where, I was using like 185 to 225. And that was at a 540, 550 bench. Kenny, would be using 275 to 315, 2 chain per side or a mini band. And both him and George are using kind of around that same weight. And they're 650 benchers. Then we'd see people come in and they'd be using like 405 with 4 chain per side. And they're 550 benchers. And it'd be like, what is the intent here? Like the intent is, to build this velocity, to reinforce technique, build that. What the fuck are you doing? And it blew my mind. Like, you don't see that these 2 guys here and Jerry O being there at the same time, these 3 guys all bench over 600 raw, right? So they're like 100 pounds stronger than you. And they're using a fucking plate less for speed work, but yeah, they're getting more out of that than what the others are. But there's that dogma, more, but the intent doesn't become the same.
I think speed work is the hardest thing for people to understand, and I don't know what book it was in. I'm probably quoting it wrong, but I think it said 23%. You can go as low as 23% and still effectively get the right stimulus from, dynamic effort work. And I think it might be science of practice of strength training that's in that. It has a very like ranges for speed and like 23% is like the lowest, something like that. But I know that like, Louis didn't like lower, like, that he was like, oh, it's 50 with accommodating resistance. And then when the raw people would ask, he's like, oh, it's 70, 75, 80%. And then they would try it and they couldn't move the weight that fast. And so like, this is why I do like kind of the, the timing of that. But between lifting too heavy and then resting too much between sets,
yes,
like those are the 2 biggest mistakes with speed work, because what you're not understanding is the purpose of what you're doing. The purpose of what you're doing is just trying to get yourself to move quicker. When I went to England and trained with Andy, like, every deadlift, there was like 5 or 6 people yelling at you, go faster, right? And you go faster. Like that verbal cue will make you go faster. Now, that's where like with bands, you can't really go slow. So, you know, you have to go fast. But again, like when you have heavy weights, you can't go fast either. Your body's only going to push. So if you can train yourself on command to try to explode harder, when those weights get heavier and you kind of touch or you get to the bottom, like, and you come out, that drive out, like that initial drive out of the hole can carry you through to lockout, right? And so when you look at a shirt bench, right, and mostly you're taking everything out of the bottom and the shirt is doing it. The stronger your bench is, the more you can get behind it. So the shirt's giving you 400, but you might also be giving you 400, right? So now you have 800 pounds like of acceleration that like your triceps are essentially catching and just finishing the lift versus, you know, if we just slow down a lift and like you're transitioning and each muscle is kicking in and having to fire as hard as they can. And so I think that that's kind of like with speed work, what people are understanding is, first of all, you got to do full range of motion, right? Like that's the key. You get muscle memory of full range of motion of what that is. Perfect reps as perfect for you, because it's going to be different for everybody. And then it's like the timing, like more weight for speed doesn't create more acceleration.
Well, the rest periods are critical, and that's probably the most overlooked factor. Is if it's a squat of trying to think of a way that I use, say 455 with bands, and me and you are squatting together, it's back to back. So is that really 60% on the seventh set? If we're going basically 45 seconds, you know, minute kind of at the longest, then that accumulated fatigue, those last few sets, you can't fuck up. Your technique needs to be dead on. You can fuck up a little bit, but it's going to be a little bit harder to finish the reps. So you force yourself, technically wise, to stay in great technique while under fatigue.
Yeah. Which, if you go back to how Olympic lifters train, right? And obviously there's a lot of controversy around them. But if you look how Olympic lifters train, usually they do their technique practice in a fatigue state. They don't do, you know, the clean and jerk or the snatch as their first movement. They do it in a fatigue state, because in competition, like that, because in fatigue, that's where you learn correct technique.
Yes.
You know, and that's why, like, when people say, like, how does this lift look? And it's like, well, if it's not a max effort, I don't know how it looks, because I don't know what's going to show up when we add another 5 pounds. Like, you can have perfect technique with lightweight, like that's fine. And so the rest period and Louis used dynamic work. He knew if you were in shape or not. Yeah. Like, if we're using this percentage, you should be able to do 12 sets of 2 with perfect technique. If you start breaking down on set 8, you're out of shape.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things can happen. You're out of shape, but it can also expose a weak point that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And that's kind of the things that I think most people don't use the main lifts in their programming to understand their weak points.
Yeah. And I wanted to circle back to that, because you said something earlier when we were talking about beginners, that if you see that technical breakdown as they're working up, well, then that's indicative. Yes, there's technique issues, but there's also indicative of a weak point. And then you address that weak point, and we're under the same mindset. You're going to address that weak point right then. Mm-hmm. You're not going to like write it in the program for the next training block. Yeah. It's like, this was exposed. That's probably going to be maybe not the supplemental movement if there's back downs, but it's going to be the next highest priority for that day is your lats are fucking weak. You need to boom, lats. It just went up over triceps, or it could be triceps. It goes up over that. And that's that auto-regulating or that coaching, you know, that goes into that, which again, when you're talking about your wife, you can't, here's what you're doing today. Like, here's the outline, you know, a template of what we'd like to do, but this may move here. This may move here. You know, this shit, all this may just go out because this first movement was a complete fucking train wreck, and you're just, you're overshot, 100%. You're done. You know, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of, and I don't think people take the time to try to get a grasp of that.
No, and that's not to say you can't make progress with a template. Right. Because having something to follow is better than nothing.
Yes.
Right. But it's kind of like stretching. Right. If you are flexible enough in a certain muscle group, you don't need to stretch it every day. right? So and then if you are really unflexible, like let's say your hip flexors are really, really tight, you probably have to spend more time stretching your hip flexors than, you would another muscle group. And so in your training, if you have a template and your template basically is this assistant exercise, because when you write a program, you pick exercises that you're trying to get the most bang for the buck from, right? But how you create champions is figuring out the things number one, you can mostly ask them, what do you never do? And if you program that, they get better. But what we're trying to do is find the small things. So yes, you got your big bang for buck exercises that are on a program. And for the majority of people, if they do them, they will get stronger, they will work. But there's always weaknesses that you have that somebody else doesn't have. When you address those, that's when you get the gains that people want, right? Like who wants to train for a whole year for a 5-pound PR? Now, once you get to all-time world record, that's what you're training for, right? But on your way up, on my way up, I went to a meet and I expected 20 to 30 pound PRs on every lift. And then when it stopped, I was like, what is going on? I didn't go up through the numbers slowly. I'd do a meet and the next meet I had huge expectations. And even when I broke the record, I didn't total I've never totaled 2,700 anything. I went from 2685, I think that was right, to the 2825. Because in my head, those numbers I hit that day, I should have hit before that meet. I just never did. So I made this huge jump, and that's when people were like, where did that come from? And then, oh, he must have been high and all this. No, motherfucker. I had not put it together on the platform. The day I broke the all-time world record, I went 9 for 9. So, I had a perfect meet. I hit all my numbers, but it was a year plus in the making of not hitting those numbers. You should make a lot of progress in strength gains, when you're not a top 10 lifter. If you're not in the top 50, top 100, you should be able to move up pretty successfully, barring you don't get injured and you're training correctly. But people who don't, it's because they're not addressing the weaknesses. So the movements they're doing are not carrying over to the things that need to improve for there to be a big jump in strength. Because again, strength is not linear when we come to gaining it. All of a sudden you could be stuck for 6 months and then all of a sudden you just 20 pounds bigger, and we see it a lot on the mental side of stuff. Mental training is so important. Most people don't even think about it. So the rise of kilo plates, people aren't stuck on 2 plates, 3 plates because it's a 55-pound plate. So they put 3 kilo plates on and they still in their mind think it's just 3 plates. And so you can trick people into hitting bigger numbers just by changing, that. The load, if you take bumper plates and you use 3 45-pound bumper plates, that 315 feels a lot heavier than 315 in kilos, right? Because of the distribution of the load. So these are all things that that is a very easy thing to get. When you look at the body, it's okay, if we can make you wider, the barbell's distributed over a bigger thing, the same weight's going to feel lighter just from that. So these are all I guess you learn this stuff when you get to the top and you have to start really digging in. But I don't think there's a need to neglect it when you're young.
Yeah.
It's not, these aren't things that are good to turn a blind eye to. These are things you go oh, I could save myself a lot of time, energy, and frustration if I was focusing on what I need to do right now to make the most progress. I don't have to never do those other things, but do I really need that right now? Do I really need, to use reverse hypers and glute hams? There's probably going to come a point where you don't really need to do a lot of reverse hypers and glute hams as much as you need to do quad work, right? If you're a wide stance squatter, wide stance box squatter, sumo deadlifter, right? You probably are going to develop a quad and hip weakness over the years. And you look at a lot of these raw lifters and their quads have, I remember Chuck Fout, the first time he came out at the Pro-Am and he deadlifted 900, I just was like, well, what's different about this guy? And his quads were hanging over his knees. That's how big his quads were. And I was like, oh, maybe if I start doing some leg press. And so we had the plyo swing, I started doing plyo. And that's how I built my 815 squat, was adding in quad work, right? And so we pendulum swung in the strength world all to posterior chain. Well, you're going to get knee injuries if you don't have any anterior chain. So you have to swing it back, right?
Yeah.
But doing all of it simultaneously isn't all, even though that's concurrent, that's conjugate. Even in conjugate, we don't do everything all at once, right? There is still phases. There's still, time to do stuff, time not to do stuff. And I think that that's something that is very hard to get through to people, because people have a belief that they can take a program, follow the program, and it's everything they need.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's one of the kind of, the word disservice may be the wrong one, but with Louis saying that, conjugate's not phasic, that's not exactly true, because as you pointed out there, just before the meet, you're deloading, the deadlift 21 days event. So there is a 3-week deload phase, just of rest and recovery. Then there's the Circumax I was in there. Then after the meet, kinda, but
I mean, it's about a month before you're back to
well,
training.
yeah, I mean,
fully.
there's a drop in drugs and stuff like that. So there's phases that are there, and when you say that, I'm like, yeah, kinda. I mean, we still do the same 4 days, and it's still the same wave. So I get where he was coming from, but there's this phasic structure because a lot of the knocks against Westside conjugate was it's not phasic, and I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. What the fuck, a 3-week wave? What would you call the next 3-week wave if the first one was, there's a drop in percentage. If you go up for 3 weeks, then you go down for 1 week to go up for 2 more weeks. Isn't that a deload? Just putting it out there. It's kind of obvious. There's a deload kind of built into there, even though that was usually the worst fucking week because it came after that other one. But I want to go back to the mental strategies. What mental strategies do you wish that you would know, that you knew 10 years ago, that you knew now that you would be able to apply as you were coming up?
So I was very fortunate, like the sports psychology department at University of Idaho worked with me. They wanted to study me because of my performance, and I naturally did a lot of mental training that they can teach, right?
And what was that?
So the big thing was imagery, like imagination imagery, like from visualization to like myself under the bar. So I will run through lifts in my head 1,000 times before I ever do them on the platform.
Now, what did that look like when you first started to do that?
So what it was imitation, right? So I would watch because luckily there was videos on YouTube, but most of the time you could buy DVDs, training DVDs. Yeah. So I watched the Westside training DVDs thousands of times, right? There's that one video of that where like the gym goes silent, he breathes in like the air of the whole gym. But I would watch them over and over, and I'd just be studying. Brent had training videos. I'd be studying like the technique, the movement pattern. And so then I'd be trying to imitate that, right? And then when I started competing, what I was doing was I would run through the lift, and every way it could go wrong would go wrong in my head, and then I would fix it. So by the time I got to the platform, when I got under the bar, like I knew how it should feel. I knew what it should. So that visualization was like a huge thing for me. Arousal control. In the beginning of my thing, I would be yelling and I'd be like, every time I'd go up to a bar. And then Brent, I noticed that like at meets, like when Brent was competing, he was like super calm, right? And so I did see both sides of the coin there, but I was like, well, why is he so calm? And then he explained like, I'm saving energy when I get under the bar and I lift, that's when I let it all go to hell. Now, sometimes I have to let a little energy out to bring me down, but like I realized pretty early on, like, oh, can I control that, right? Which it did piss off some other lifters because I'd be joking and laughing. And then like when I'd get under the bar, I had a switch I could flip, but they couldn't do that. So they'd be serious and I'd be fucking around and they'd be like, what's wrong with AJ, right? But like I learned how to control that. Self-talk. So early on, Mike Miller, he was arguably the first guy to squat 1,200, was red lighted for depth. It would get past an federation.
Fucking today, it would be too low.
So, but he posted, he had his Natharine barbell, and I was following Metal Militia back then. He posted a link to the guy he was working with who had created like audio tapes for him. So I listened to these and it was like my veins are filled with iron, my bones are steel rods. And so like I just got that audio and I just run it through, and then I just started that self-talk myself. I didn't need to listen to somebody else telling me. I would just run. So before my meets, I'd be like sitting there and I'd be like, unbreakable, I'm untouchable. I'd just like be like basically, self-talk. And so what the sports psychology department gave me was, you can actually improve these, right? So that's when I started paying attention to like actually like every day practicing, like thinking about it, like doing it. What I know now versus what I didn't know when I was doing all of that is how it applies outside of the gym.
Yeah.
Right. Because I didn't realize everything's connected. Right. So when I'm having an argument with my girlfriend, well, my ex-wife or whatever it was, I didn't realize how that affected in the gym, right? When I was stressed about work, I didn't know how it affects. So I wasn't using these tools in my everyday life. I wasn't using arousal control. I wasn't using it. So I'm going through life in one way and then coming to the gym and trying to, get myself to that point. And so that's what I wish I'd is like you said earlier, it takes a while to learn that all these lessons in the gym are all we need. And your book, I think it's Under the Bar, book, that was the first that I started, you wrote, and then you wrote about how it applied outside. And that was very powerful for me because I started to, oh, wait a minute. Like the reason I'm successful over here is because I'm successful here. I started to connect the dots. But yeah, understanding that like, goal setting I was using back then too, right? I would set a goal and then I would break down. Like, so when I started training with Brent, he said, what's your goal? I said, I want to squat the world record. I want to beat you. And he's all like, okay, here's what you need to do. So I would set a goal, but then I wouldn't think about that goal. It was there. Like that goal's never changed. So I'm committed to that goal. I'm going to do everything it takes to get there. And then I work backwards. Okay, what do I need to do now? Okay, when I started training with Brent, I had a 500 squat. So squatting 1200 was a decade away. I didn't need to keep going back to my goals to figure it out, right? It was just, now, okay, what do I need to do this week, next week? I need to show up every day in the gym. But I didn't apply that to life. So, in life, I'd set a goal and then I would change the goal and I'd change the goal. And it's like, relationships are easier one where I was so far away of what I did in the gym in relationships. Marriage, for example, I didn't realize like marriage was just a commitment to make it work. Right? You're committing to each other to no matter what, you're going to fight tooth and nail for the relationship to make it work. So in my relationships, every time shit got hard, I said, I don't need this shit. I'm out of here. Like I just move on to the next one. Like hopefully the next one works out. Like, cause I didn't have that. And then I started thinking, well, where else in my life do I not have commitment? Well, I noticed I'd moved, like I'd gone from England to Oregon, to Idaho, to Washington, to Kentucky, to Columbus, to California, to Vegas, to California. Oh, maybe I should try to like settle somewhere and build, right? And because every time you move, you kind of reset, right? And so I started looking at these different things and like, even still, like there is gaps that I have that I'm like, how do I do it so successfully over here? Right? Just the concept of showing up to the gym every day, right? There was days I did not want to go to the gym. There was days I did not need to listen to Louis. It's like, not this shit again. But you just do because the end goal was what you were going for. So like, there's days where I don't want to do certain work stuff, but it's like, you just have to. And it took me a while to realize that, like something regardless of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, there's just stuff that has to get done. It doesn't matter. You can be pissed off today. You can be a low day. You can have no energy, but it needs to get done, And then also the concept of just like, some days you can't work out. Like some days you have to force yourself, like I'm not going to the gym today because I'm not recovered. If I go to the gym, I'm going to beat myself up. So like there is times, and that's the same in life. Some days you have to call an audible and say, nah, fuck it. Today I need to recharge. But again, it's just, I never saw the connection between it all. So I learned the sports psychology. I was applying it to lifting, but I wasn't applying it to my life. And that's what I wish I'd thought more about back then. It's like, I didn't have goals for life. I had goals for lifting. I didn't have, the same discipline, the same commitment, the same, attitude towards everything. So I think that's the things that people can work on. But I think it's just, if people understand they have full control over everything, right? No matter what happens, like they play some kind of role in it. So you get an argument with your partner, like you caused that in some way, shape or form. And if you can let your ego go and look at it and say, well, why did this happen? Like what can I, because you can't control the other person, but like what triggered you to get in the argument? Like, oh, I need to learn how to control my emotions. My kids have made me most aware of this because they trigger me more than anything ever, right? But like I'll sit and reflect like, okay, it wasn't a good day today. Why did I get to the point that I tried to scare them to listen? Well, you said 7 times to them, like nicely, like, please don't do that. Like, that's not safe. And then you exploded. Okay. Why did I explode? Because I didn't feel like I was being listened to. So now I'm not upset that they're not listening. I'm upset that they're not doing what I tell them to do because I want to be in control versus, oh, if I had reframed the situation right? They're saying, don't do this. And I'd said, hey, like who wants to do this? Like, you can change a kid's state so quickly, but I just kept hammering down the same course. That's my fault. It's not my kid's fault for not listening. Like, and you know, you understand that kids, it's kind of like Lou. Lou never said anything to not try to help you get stronger. Kids don't do anything to piss you off. They're not purposely trying to piss you off. So, you know, it's like, oh, I'm in control of my emotions. So, you know, like, I don't feel like a good father when I do that. That's my fault. It's not my kid's fault. My kid's not going to suddenly do, oh, you should listen to me because I told you to. Like, no, like, I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand how to change their state. Okay, how do I get better emotional intelligence? Go away, learn some stuff, start testing it. And that's like the redirect with kids was like a game changer for me. And then I was like, wait a minute, what in my life, like when I lose my temper, could I redirect myself? Like, and so, you know, if you're working on a project, and I've had this where, you know, I'm working on something and like on a web page or something, and then it crashes, and I lose all the fucking work. Right. And then I'll try to, if I try to start over again, well, I'm pissed off, I'm frustrated, and it never goes well. But if I say, all right, I'm gonna take a break, I'm gonna go do something completely different and then come back to it. Right. And so it's just learning these things, like when I learn it, it's like, okay, where else does this transfer? And that was just something that, like, again, triggered over here, like, okay, I can change them by redirecting. Wait a minute, can I redirect myself? Like, what if I could catch myself? And so, you know, I still lose my temper, but I can calm down and get back to a lot quicker. Right. And I'm like, eventually I'll just feel the feeling and I'll be able to shut it down before it comes out. But it's like, oh, okay. And I think that those are the kind of things that, like, I wish I had known that the stuff I was learning in the gym, like, transferred over, like, because I feel as if I would have, my early 30s when I was doing psychedelics and going on these retreats, trying to figure out, like, my mind and like what's wrong with me and all this stuff, I would have had better coping skills. Right. And because I knew how the gym worked, but I didn't know how the world worked. And it's like, you know, the more you go into the world, you know, where do I play? What's my role? Like, how do I present myself? Like, there's all this stuff. And it's like, reality is like, if you can just accept who you are and be okay with who you are, like, you'll do fine. And that's what, in the gym, I was who I was, you know, I was, that's who I wanted to be. I was myself. That's where I was myself the most. Outside of the gym, I felt like that freak doesn't fit in with the world. So I had to pretend to be someone else.
You've, over the past 2 decades or more, you've navigated, you know, this powerlifting world and been around people at the top levels, but you've also navigated this business world and been around people at the top levels. We just had Bedros Kilian out last week, and I know you know him and you know his story and all that stuff. So what similarities do you see between, you know, the high achievers in the business world and the high achievers in the powerlifting world?
Yeah, I think, and this is going to be hard for most people to understand, I think that the truth is you're never satisfied. It's never enough. You, like, no matter what you do, you never feel like you've made it. Right. So there's, early on, it drives you, but then you start to realize there's a problem, right? You start to realize this obsession. So then you kind of seek, well, how do I like stop doing this? And then you actually realize that that's actually your strengths, right? Like, the fact that you can do that is your strengths. So the similarities I find is that it's just like they're all in on work. Like successful business people, like, think of Elon Musk, for example, with all the companies he's running, like, he doesn't have time for hobbies, right? So successful powerlifters, like, business is their hobby. Powerlifting is their hobby. Like, vacations, business trips are vacations. Powerlifting is vacation. Now you start to add more stuff in because you realize, like, you got to spend time with family and there is a thing to disconnect and stuff like that. But in reality, it's like the same obsession, the same all-in attitude. Like, that's what they've chosen to do. The other thing I find is that the success you have, like, there's no end to it. Like in powerlifting, you might stop competing, but, like, you can't stop working out. Like, you can't stop moving. You can't stop being like that's just part of who you are. It's what keeps you sane. It's what allows you to continue. In business, like, there's no end goal. there's never enough money. Like there's never enough hours in the day. There's never, so what you start to learn is like, again, optimal performance. Like what is it I do best? Now, the beautiful thing in business is you can outsource a lot of stuff to other people, right? Like in training, you can't. Like I got weak hamstrings. You know what?
I want your hands.
Yeah. like unless we come out with a sport where there's like, we have one person who squats, one person who benches, one person who deadlifts, like you have to get good at all three. That's the sport, right? The days of being good at two and, you know, they used to be, you get your big squat, big bench, and you could have a lower deadlift and you wouldn't win. Now you got to have, you know, you got to be good at all of them. So like that's in business, you get to do that, but in powerlifting, you can't. But again, go back to in business, like you're trying to figure out what is 20% of stuff you do well that you should do. And then you slowly get rid of the 80% of stuff. In training, it's kind of like the same thing. You're trying to look at like max effort lifts. There's a great example, like the amount of max effort lifts we did and then didn't do ever again, because it was just like, this just makes no sense. This is not worth my time. So it's the same thing. You're trying to optimize your training and really get it down to like the core 6 max effort lifts you use. Now you might with those 6, you could have 40 variations because you've got foot placement, bands, chains, like all those different things. But like you have a core group of things. You're not pulling like, oh, let's do this random thing today. And I think so that's the kind of thing. And then the biggest thing is like we didn't train 4 days a week. I don't care what anyone says. Like I didn't do 4 sessions a week. Like I at least did 6, you know, if not 8. Like Louis was always doing 15 to 20 or whatever. It was hilarious. But like your time in the gym is not the only time you're thinking about being a better lifter. Like, and you might be stretching at home. You might get, you know, you might build a home gym so you can do accessories. Like, so all of these, like, so it spills out into the rest of your world. Successful business people, there is no clock. They do not start work at 8 a.m. and finish at 5 p.m. Like it is 24/7, 365. Now they might not be in the office. You might not be able to get a hold of them, but you know, I'm sure when when you're on vacation, like you're still checking certain stats. You're still looking at certain things. You might even be just sitting there thinking about something, right? It's tough because family is here and you want to be present, but you've got this thing over here that, you know, if you don't figure out in your mind. So like you're there, but you're not really there. That's another thing. Successful people struggle with being completely present. Right. And that's why I love things like this, because there's no way to be outside of this. Yeah. This is what's happening right now. But those are the things that like, it's like that obsession, all of that, like it doesn't end when they leave the gym. It carries over through and they can't ever change that. It's who they are. And the cool thing is I think that most people need to figure out who they are, be okay with it, and let go of who they think they should be. Right. And that's what I see. Like, you know, I've known Bedros and I've seen him go through his things. He knows who he is now. Right. And he doesn't allow for anything else. And that's what I think all of us who figure it out, figure out. And then you just keep working on trying to be that person and more of that person. And, you know, you do things you regret, you do things you screw up on, but you go, okay, like this is what happened. Let's fix it. Let's, you know, move forward. And I think that failure is a thing that both sides embrace, right? And so putting a big weight on your back, like there's a risk you're going to get hurt. There's a risk you're going to fail. There's a risk, you know, risk is going to crush you. You know, risks in business, you could bankrupt the company. You go out of business. But what's the worst that's going to happen? I just have to rebuild. I just have to restart. And just knowing that, like, if you know how to do something, you can just repeat it. So the fear goes away. And so you start taking those chances, those opportunities. And then the last one I would say is, it's probably not the last, but the last one I can think of is the willingness to invest in themselves. Nobody I know who's successful isn't investing time and money into learning from other people who are ahead of them in the game. You know, whether that's attending other people's events, whether that's, you know, hiring them for coaching, mentoring. Like for me, it was traveling, right? Like when I started lifting, Brent was an hour and a half away. Okay, I'm going to Brent as much as I can. We went twice a week. You know, when I took the job in Kentucky, I took the job specifically because it was a 4-hour drive from Westside. You know, every Friday I was coming over to Westside. You know, I can't get people to drive 30 minutes to come train with me. They say to me they want to come train, and then they never come. And so, you know, now there is a gym on basically in every little town. there is a meet in every city, right? I was looking back at some of my old results, and I was using the Wayback Machine to go back on the APF website. And like in '05, when I did APF Detroit, there was only like 13 meets the entire year for APF. I'm like, there's 13 meets a weekend right now, like with everything.
In state.
Yeah. So when you think about it, it's like the most successful lifters are still traveling to do meets. They're still traveling to learn from people. They're investing in coaches. Most of the top lifters have coaches of some sort. They're building teams around them as well. And so it's like, it's the same thing in business. And it's just their all in is on making money or building their business. Like the money is a byproduct, right? The money is just a byproduct. Same with the PRs on the platform. It's a byproduct of the work you put in, but that's the thing they're all in on. Like that is the number one priority to them, is the business. And I think the tough thing is that we have so many inputs, right? And so, you're a certain way, and then you start to feel guilty because someone else is saying, oh, you should be like this or you should be like that. And you think, oh man, I don't do that. Then you try to do it, but it's not who you are, and you suck at it, right? But then you focus on the thing you suck at. And I don't mean like if you did an ab exercise, oh, I suck at that, I can't, because that's just because you're weak. But like if I try to do Olympic lifting, I would suck at it, right? Now, if I focused on Olympic lifting, thinking my power lifts are going to go up, that's a big mistake, right? So in business, like when you're good at what you do, it's real easy to say like, oh, I should do this and I should do this and I should do this and I should do this, right? Because like you think that but it's like, no, this is what you're good at. This is what you should do. And those that try to do too much, spread themselves too thin, they struggle. And so the whole concept of multiple streams of income is unique in a sense, because really what people should be teaching you is build a stream of income that you can then take the money from and use it to have things that generate money for you, not try to do 17 things to make money. Those 17 things come from, okay, like if you make a bunch of money here and you invest in real estate, that's going to make you money. But what you invest in should not take all your time, because you don't have enough time. So your main focus is on this thing. The number one investment is this thing. And that's like in powerlifting, like the reason you're not doing strongman in your training is because you don't have time to do it. Right. So you're not trying to throw everything into this pot to do this training. And that's the same in business. So I think those are the things that I see a lot of correlation there. But it's the drive, like having a vision and drive and being driven towards it. I've not met a single successful people that doesn't have a vision that nobody else can see, nobody else believes in, but they just know it's going to happen. You could call it, a divine gift from God or whatever, but like, every successful person has a vision and they're driven towards achieving it, and they don't really give a fuck what anybody else says.
Now, in both these worlds, we have, now I'll narrow it down a little bit. So in the entrepreneur space, you have people who are fake and real, right? And then in the online powerlifting sphere, you got people who are fake, and real. So how does one navigate? Because the rules are going to be the same if you're the person looking for that mentor or looking for that coach, in both worlds, right? So the advice will be the same. Yeah. So how does one navigate that landscape?
Well, I would say the biggest thing that gives away someone if they're fake is if they act like they know it all, right? Like everyone I know who is killing it has like imposter syndrome. Like they don't think they're as good as they are. Like they don't have like, someone else introduces them and they feel uncomfortable with the way they introduce them, right? Like, which is tough, because the people who get the most attention are the people who are out there acting like they got all their shit together, that they have all the answers. And I think it's like the person who's just like honest, like, hey, like this is what I've done. This may or may work for you. Like, and I'm going to help you the best of my ability. They're usually 10 times better than the coaches out there being like, my thing is the best thing. Like it's the only thing that works. I have all the answers. I guarantee results. And I made a post the other day about a lot of agencies right now who are out there being like, work with me, and if I don't get results, I'll work with you for free. I'm like, that's the immediate turnoff. Like, why would you make that guarantee? You immediately tell me that like, you don't know if you can get me results. And so you want me to take the risk on you to experiment in my business. And if it doesn't work, well, cool, you get to keep working for free for me, but you don't know what you're doing. So how does that help me, right? So like, it's things like that like, on one side, it looks really good. Oh, they're so confident they're going to do it. No, they're not confident, because if they're confident, they would never do it for free. Like, you're the risk. Like, I'm not the risk here. Like, I know what I know, and I'm confident in what I know. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know if you're going to follow my training program or not.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I know what I'm putting into it. So like, there's no like me and you figuring it out. Like, no, I got what I got. But the fake people, like, it's usually about them. Very little about their clients, right? If they're still, like, in the beginning, you're the hero in a story, right? In the beginning, if you're marketing, you're the first person who's gone through the transformation. You're the first person who's figured out what you figured out. But after a few years, if you're still your best case study, you suck as a coach, right? Like, because, and so like after a year, your clients should all be your heroes. So like, if you're trying to look at a coach and they don't have clients who are achieving things and PRing and they're not able to share those results, they're not a good coach. And I just, Luka Hokovar was out in San Diego and met up with him, and we were talking, and, I was saying, what's the landscape like? He's got small business coaching, and then he's got like, programming, and he does a lot of different stuff. He's got his gym, everything. And he's like, man, honestly, like coaches who struggle, most of the time they just suck. And if they rely on marketing and sales to like build their business, the problem is like marketing and sales should be the beginning fuel, and then results should be after that, right? And so if they're struggling 5 years in to get clients, like they mustn't be that good. Or they're somewhere that like if they're, there's like 500 people in the town, it's just, that's a logistics issue, but very few people are like that. Usually, and people drive, and I was just talking to the barber the other day, and, he's got people that come 40 minutes to get a haircut there because it's like a good haircut. He's very good at what he does. Like people drive for results. Like, and so if your clients are not walking, talking billboards for you, and you're still relying on marketing, like you can assess if you're good or not just based on results. If you have no results, you have nobody who like is cheering for you. And so when you go and look, on Instagram, for example, if someone has 100,000 followers and then you look at a post and it has 20 likes, it's fake. Like they either bought the following or nobody gives a shit who follows them, right? And so you can look at like, what's the engagement? What's the interaction? What do people show up for? And then how long have they been in the business? Because like you don't make it 10 years unless you're good, right? I don't care what anybody says, like, oh, he's an asshole, he's this. If they make it 10 years, they're good. Like, because they would go out of business. Like you just can't survive on being terrible. So I think those are things you got to look for. And that doesn't mean that someone in the beginning isn't good. It just means that like you should approach it with a different mindset, right? With a little bit more, okay, they're experimenting or they're new to this, and so like we're going to work together, right? But like if you're hiring someone and you want them to know what you need to do, right? You should probably look for someone who has a lot of people who they've worked with who are similar to you, like the style. And that's what you can ask them, like, hey, if you train alone, do you there's, when people say like, you shouldn't interview coaches. No, you probably shouldn't have 10 people you're going to talk to and try to figure out like who you want to hire. But when you're hiring someone, you should be able to ask questions. And the questions should be like, hey, I train alone on my own. Like, I work nights. And so I train in the morning after get to work. Have you worked with someone like that before? Because it is different. Right. Or like, hey, I know you typically do this, but my gym doesn't have this equipment. How would you adjust for me? And those are the things that like, I think people don't do their due diligence, because like, I don't like to say anyone purposely is trying to be fake or screw anybody over, but like do your due diligence, like take responsibility yourself to like actually spend a little time looking into what they're doing. And, if it's $50, like online programming or online coaching, there's no coaching. For $50, you're not getting coaching, right?
Yeah.
And if you are, then they're probably not making enough money, and like it's probably going to go up at some point, right? So like a lot of people undervalue themselves in the beginning because they have no idea the time that's going to go into stuff. But like, online coaching is an interesting space because people think $200 a month is expensive. And I'm like, if you had a personal trainer and they charge in California, it's like 100, it's like 80 to 120, and that's even going up with inflation.
An hour.
An hour.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you go see one time a week, you're in the, you know, almost $500 just for one time a week. You're expecting this person to write an entire program for you, watch all your training, give you feedback. Like, how many hours does that take? And you want to pay $100? You think that's expensive? So and a lot of it is because people start and they don't know the workload it's going to take. And then they find themselves in this predicament because they got a ton of people paying $50 that expect all of this. And you can't really take stuff away once you start. You can only, you know, so like, I think that you just have to look. And if someone's higher priced, they probably have less clients. They probably going to give you more attention. You're probably going to get more bang for your buck. So the value exchange, even though you're spending more money, you're getting more in return. So you're going to be happier. And, you know, I was talking to one of Luke's clients. They had another trainer before, an online trainer. And they said, that, you know, they asked me to film every video and I would send every video. And they're like, I never got any feedback. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't be watching every video either. Like, how much were you paying? It was like $60 a month. I'm like, yeah, for $60 a month, what you would get is a template and that's it. And maybe a community that was self-managed.
Yeah.
But I think these are the things you have to look at because like most people don't understand this. Like they don't understand like what's their experience, how long they've been around for. And there's nothing wrong with hiring someone who's only slightly ahead of you because they still have some answers, but you have to look at it for what it is and be willing, like, where do I fall on this spectrum? You know, when I got into the bodybuilding, okay, I'm hiring John Meadows to do my training. I hired Shelby to do my diet. I went straight to IFBB pros. Like, I'm not hiring the guy down the road. Posing was by Derek Farnsworth, another IFBB pro, right? So I was like, I just, you know, now I was in a situation where number one, I have access. Number two, I have the finances, right? And so you have to, what you can't do. But the reality is most fake people have no results. Like, you know, and that's really the giveaway. It's like, they don't have their own results. They don't have results for clients because the argument of like, do you need to be a good lifter to be a coach? The answer is no. Like, you don't have to be a fucking all-star football player to be a top NFL coach. You can be an incredible coach without ever being a good lifter. And arguably, like, Louis was good. Like people don't know how good Louis was, like, because he competed open his whole life, but his numbers as masters are like number one. But it's not on there because he only competed in the open. But arguably, Louis was never the best lifter in Westside ever. There was always people better than him, right? But he was the best coach. And he was, most people don't realize, like, he wasn't a coach, like he just sat and watched. Like, he was yelling at you, but he knew how to motivate you. He knew, like, all the things of the art of coaching. Like, that's what most fake people don't have, is the ability to coach. They can just regurgitate.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over that I didn't cover?
No, I think for me right now, like, what's interesting is the development from seeing guys raw, you know, go from knee sleeves to knee sleeves that can put plates on top of it. And like, what I would love to see is just like, I would love to see more people like maximize their potential and then start to move into the equipment. You know, I would like to see people accepting, like, there's too much like us versus them in powerlifting. There's too many federations that, like, you know, people are criticizing this federation, that federation. And I think that when you look at strongman or you look at any of these sports that are a little bit more commercial or more prize money, stuff like that, it's because you have everybody coming together still. You know, like in strongman, there's like 2 federations over here, but that's it. There's not like 64 federations. Like, nobody gets pissed off and just starts a new one because, you know, they try to work through their issues. And I think that that's kind of something that we're seeing over here is like now there is reasons to leave federations, right? There is things like the decisions that are made that are enough. But like, that's a big issue is over here is like, you know, you have massive meet over here, but these lifters would never attend and watch. And then you have like the WOPO meet over here and these guys just bash it. And it's like, how do we start to bring everybody together on the same platforms? Because what's odd to me is you go to the Arnold or you go to the Olympia or you go to any of these expos and they have like 4 different powerlifting federations there. You know, one for single ply, one for raw, one, like, okay, cool. But like, this sport is only ever going to have an audience of people in this sport. Like, it's very rarely. But so if we have so much hatred between whether someone has, you know, a knee wrap on or a knee sleeve, you know, and then you go into single ply, multiply, band shirts. And that's what baffles me is the multiply guys who hate band shirts. I'm like, so you're okay with a super duper phenom with 8-ply neckline, like, scoop neck, reinforced stitching, but band shirt, you draw the line? Like, it's okay to get 350, but as soon as we get over 400, you draw the line. I'm like, that was the same as the IPF guys with the single ply. Like, it's okay to wear 1 layer of gear, but 2 layers of gear. No, that's too much. Like, now you're cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it'd be like saying it's okay to take 500 milligrams of test, but if you take 1,000, like, you're a cheater. It's like,
Yeah.
well, no, we're both taking tests, buddy. It's the same shit. So what I would like to see is more meets that, and multiply meets have basically become raw multiply because, it's an IPA meet.
Yeah, everybody's there.
But I would like to see that like actually become more of a thing where the top lifters, like in raw, the meet has the top lifters in multiply. But the sport is the sport. I'm not sure if it'll ever change, but I just feel as if like when you go to a meet, or when you talk, like I don't ever go to a raw meet because I'm judging WRPF meets and stuff like that. 99% of people are raw. Like I never feel any bad blood. It's like, it's a good time. The community of powerlifting is incredible in person. Like, but for some reason, when you get online, it's like everybody's going against each other, criticizing each other, stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I just like to see people start to make an effort to come together more and push this sport forward, because when you look at where the sport is now versus, when I started, when you started, like there was no career as an online coach, right? Like the only way to build a team was to have a gym and build a team, right? And it was so expensive to do that, which it still kind of is. But like there is so many avenues in this sport now to build a livelihood, to make it a part of who you are. There just seems like, when you see strongman and you see how that is at the Arnold now with a massive stadium and people on stage, you think like powerlifting is not a bad sport. Like it's not like it's not that bad. And there's enough powerlifters. So when you look at the number of powerlifters that you hold a meet, you should be able to get like a few thousand people to show up to watch a meet, especially at one of these things. But because everybody wants to be a state or world record holder, and the all-time numbers don't mean as much anymore because it's like there's no qualification for if you want to start a federation, I just need an LLC and they'll accept my numbers. Like where it's so it's like this. It's one of those things where we need to worry less about like the separation and more about like, how do we create an environment that everybody wants to show up to, wants to be a part of? Because I think that a lot of raw lifters could have a longer career if they knew that like once they hit a certain level, they could transition over. And I talk to so many older lifters who the reason they wear gear is it allows them to keep training. Like without the gear, they couldn't compete. They couldn't participate. And so they're not really gear whores. They're just wearing a loose pair of briefs and, a squat suit, but it allows them to keep progressing. It allows them to have that same like, experience they had when they were younger, but it's out of necessity, not choice. And I would just love to see more people like that, like, transition over. And I'd love to see the strongest guys, and it's always questionable, but I would love to see, what could Dan Bell total? What could he total? He put him, I know he's working on his health and stuff like that, but like, man, like, would he be the first to squat 1,500? Like, I don't know. Like, technically, if you squat 1,000 raw, you should be able to at least squat 1,400 in gear. Yeah. Okay, it's going to take time because different training, but like, I just want to see that human potential go forward. And I think it only happens when there's when there's enough push for it. The reason multiply lifts haven't really gone anywhere is because there's not really enough people pushing it, right? Raw didn't move in 20 years. And then now the numbers are being broken every week. Well, it's because people are focused on that. People are pushing to that. So you have more people, doing that. But if we could start to bring everything together and it was like, oh, you start raw and then you kind of get to these numbers and you go to the next level and you go to the next level. Like I can't imagine what the human potential is. And it's, seeing Jimmy put up a 1,400 bench, you think, man, what could someone squat? Like, these guys that are squatting, 1,000 plus raw, what could they squat in multiply gear? Because I
think some of the problem with multiply is, it's a fraction of the sport to begin with, and it always has been. So if you go way back, single ply still was way more popular than multiply ever was. Just on a number basis, say there were 20,000 lifters 30 years ago, 3,000 multiply, the rest were single ply. It's just the federations, how they're brought up. You drug tested is always going to have more than not drug tested. It's just how it goes. And where
there's a division, and say the multiply may still be 3,000, but there's a lot of division just within that 3,000. Where in the raw, there's division and bickering over federation, stuff like that. But when you go and look at what the top untested meets are, or the top tested meets, they're always kind of the same. There's 3 different ones that kind of will Ghost Clash, American Pro. They all kind of unite on what is the biggest. Yeah. And so even with the differences on the raw side, there's enough support behind these are the top meets, tested or not tested, right? So yes, they still have their division, but they're united on here's what the top things are. That doesn't happen in the multiply. So if the multiply doesn't get their shit together when they're already a small minority, it will always stay where it is. Yeah. And so, a lot of people want that, that's the push behind that is they want it to stay like that because they want it to be this underground. And I understand it 100% because I know people that feel that way. Like, fuck that. We want this to stay the way that it is and not grow, where you can see the contrast, between the two. But I do believe in the future, if I was to predict, you are going to see what you're saying happen to where some of these bigger meets are going to have divisions in the meet, perhaps on the same, platform, same day, that will have, the single ply, multiply and sleeves or wraps or whatever is popular all right there competing together. And I think that's closer to happening than what people think it is because the sport is growing and it has more eyes, and it would be the smartest thing for anybody who wants to try to build the greatest amount of eyes to them would be able to do. And it'd be very easy to be able to do, to be able to pull that through.
It doesn't take much to get lifters to do things. And I think the reason I care a little bit about it is because everything I have in my life came from this, when I was a kid and going through what I went through, like the magazines were the first stage of is the only thing magazines you got were bodybuilding, but that was the first stage of like obsession with training. I had Strongman on TV that I watched, I had magazines. And then when I came over here, it was like, like everybody was into lifting but like I came as Ashley and my name is and now AJ. Well, it was AJ because, in powerlifting, like when they started announcing me as a female because that was, normal. And so then I'd walk out and they'd be like, oh, and it was just awkward for me as a 17-year-old to get called a girl before, oh my gosh, she's opening with this. Like, this is a huge lift for a teenage female. And then it was like, oh, and never mind, so I just started putting Ashley John. They started calling me John Ashley, just became AJ. Well, that became me. And everything I've achieved, even in business, has been through lifting. Every connection I've made, everything. And so like for me, it's given me everything like I've ever dreamed of has come through this. I never saw that, Pat. When I was a kid, it was basketball. I was going to be a basketball player. I was going to be in the NBA. That was my ticket. Somehow it ended up in powerlifting. But like for me, it's taught me so much. And I just feel as if like most people who are struggling in life, the research proves that if you work out and it's good for your mental health stuff. But see, most people who don't have this, if they could have this, like it would be such a game changer for them. And so, like for me, it's like if we can create something that people want to watch or like is like not marketable, but like is not so taboo, and people can find this. It's like when they can find that they can make themselves better and they start to build self-confidence. And I was actually just talking to one of Luke's training partners, like their family is not supportive whatsoever of this. And I was just because they can't see a vision. I was like, your family naturally just wants to protect you. So they are just scared because they don't understand this and they have no understanding of what this is to you. I said, but answer me this, has your self-confidence gone up since you lift? Yeah, like I've lost a ton of weight. Like I'm doing things I never thought was possible. And it's like changed my perspective on what I could do in my life. It's making me a better parent for my children. I said, yeah. I said, and so that's why, like, it doesn't matter what they say to you because they can't see what you see. They can't experience what you see. I said, but it'll only be a matter of time before people start coming to you and asking for help. And she's like, oh, it's funny at work. One of my coworkers has started asking, like, how did you do that? And then her cousin's been working with her, and helped her lose weight. And I said, yeah, that's that's the thing you now get to give back. Like you have gained and now you get to give back. And I don't know where her journey will lead her, but I almost guarantee she'll end up in this field doing something because of the impact it's made on her that other people see and witness. And so for me, the reason I've always, in the beginning, I wanted powerlifting to be huge because I want to be rich and famous, right? And then really it's like, I want to be famous in my own world, but like, I don't want to not be able to go in an airport without getting harassed. Like, so I don't care about any of that. Like for me, it's like, if we can shine a light on this sport, like it can change so many people's lives. And right now with the way the world is, like people are trying to plug into things. And I think powerlifting is one of the best things people could plug into to not only improve their life, but start to create a ripple effect and improve other people's life. Because the amount, Louis never saw this, and I always try to get him to see this. I said, can you not see how many people you've created that are now in the strength and conditioning world who have built businesses or NFL coaches? Can you not see the impact you made? And he did. I think he did towards the end, but like for the longest time, he just saw it as everybody who left the gym. He just saw it. They just fucking left. They left everybody. Like, what good is that to us? But it's like, that's the impact. Like you can see what he's done. You can see everybody who's come through him. You can see the when he passed, the amount of people not in powerlifting that he impacted. And I'm like, that's the power this sport has. If we can just get our shit together and stop arguing with each other, like we can, and it's the question I have is how come all these kids in high school are doing powerlifting and then none of them doing when they grow up? What happens? Like, why do they just quit? Like powerlifting is one of those sports that you technically never have to leave unless you get hurt or something. So what happens to all these kids? They go to college and where there's not programs and stuff like that, and then they just fade off. Like we already have a foundation in high school. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of high school competitors right now. A bunch of those are probably just one-offs, but like how many in that could have a path in this? But they don't see anything. There's nothing, you're not seeing a path. There's no organizational structure. There's no, unification. And so I go back to what you were saying, if we can kind of get our shit together a little bit, I think we can make a lot of good impact on the world and give, strength is never a bad thing. What does Barbell say? Strength is never weakness. Weak is never strength. Like it's true. Like strength is one of those things. It's proven, like even in your old age, like if the stronger you are, the better you have for a life. So this is never something that's ever going to be a negative to someone in general, like, generalization. Obviously we're on the spectrum, but for the majority of people, this is only going to add and improve their life. And you see it at meets. You go to meets and you see the excitement people have and who they were. And you see people who've overcome addiction through, lifting. Lifting saved their life. See people who have, were suicidal, lifting saved them from being suicidal. When you know the impact that can create, it's kind of hard to not want to see this sport go in a different direction. And I think there is happening in certain areas, but I just like to see everybody on board,
Yeah, and I think that's something that regardless of the federation, lifter, style of lifting, everybody agrees on that. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the disagreements amongst all these people is in a very small sector, but they don't see that because that's amplified and they don't see that bigger picture, from there, where that's why I say it's closer than people think because nobody will not agree with that. You see, there's like, no, I didn't do shit for me. I can't think of anyone, right? Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, I just appreciate being here and, those listening. I think the biggest thing I hope people take away from this is just to think a little more, and realize that if you're doing the sport of powerlifting, like your limitations on your life are put there by yourself. And that was the gift that powerlifting gave me. My reality was shifted instantly. I got to train with Brent Mikesell. So what I thought was heavy before I trained with him, I'd seen in the Bigger, Faster, Stronger magazines, 600-pound squat, that was all I'd seen. And then I started training with him. I think the first day there, he tripled 900 in briefs. Right. And I was just like, holy, but it was an instant shift in my reality of possibilities. And luckily I've seen that in other areas of life. And I just think that that people have this ability within them to do more, and powerlifting is the gift that gave that to me. So I hope that just from this conversation, if anything, they could just look at their life and be like, I'm in control. I can achieve whatever I want. And if that leads them to be successful powerlifters, fantastic. But if it leads them to be successful in the other areas of their life, I think that is just as important.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out. It's great seeing you. You'll be back again, I'm sure. And we're done.
Hey, Matt Goodwin here with elitefts.com equipment sales. Just wanted to put this out here to let you guys know that our team of equipment specialists are here to help you guys. So whether it's a high school, a personal training facility, a garage gym, we've got years and years of experience on building these things out and laying them out and designing them and making sure you're buying the things that you need and not necessarily the things that you will never use. So myself, Nate Harvey, Chris Bartle, we've got years of experience. Chris and Nate have both been strength coaches. Business owners, we can help you guys in any aspect of your gym build. So never hesitate to reach out to us. There's a contact us page on the website. All of our information's on there. You can reach me directly at mgoodwin@elitefts.net. The phone number here is 888-854-8806. And we can answer any questions you guys have. The website's a little hard to navigate at times. We have different ways that we can kind of guide you through that process as well. We can help you with layout. We can help you with pricing, quotes, anything else you need. There's other options that are not necessarily on the website as far as customizations, different dumbbells, plate options, cardio equipment. So feel free to reach out to us at any time. We're always here to help, and we look forward to hearing from you.